Thank you for all being here. I am calling this meeting of March 14th of the City Council to order. And Bob, would you lead us in this pledge?
Please face the flag and hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And would you do a roll call?
Yes. Councilmembers Gonzalez?
Here.
Yes.
Stransky? Ornstein?
I'm here.
Rodriguez? Yes. Mayor Strong?
I am here. And before we go to public communications, we have a great honor and privilege to thank Bob Peralt for his months of service as interim city manager. It has been just such a pleasure and such a godsend to have you here in our city. And you've done such a great job, and you've warmed the hearts of the staff, and I think gained all of our respect.
Well, thank you.
So
Thank you very much.
And we would like to present you
Oh my gosh.
with a card and a...
Oh. Oh, thank you very, very much. Thank you. For those that don't know, I'm a horseman, and so this is very appropriate, and I love the story of Seabiscuit and have always kept it. So thank you very much. I'll certainly cherish that.
And it's by our local artist,
Oh.
Marjo Wilson.
And it's signed and all of that. Thank you.
And I believe we are going to have a short break, and I hope that those of you, maybe a few minute break for a little thank you gathering, celebration. And before we do that, if any of the other council members would like to say a word.
Yeah, I'd like to, it's never an easy job to come into a situation like this. You know, you have a short period of time to get up to speed and to get the confidence of all the people who you're working with, and to actually do more than just being a placekeeper. And I think you've done it. And
I know you have.
I really enjoyed working with you. I think you're very thorough. You're communicative. Yeah, that's a word. And thanks for being here.
Well, thank you.
I just wanted to echo what they've all said, and I really appreciated it and felt that I could lean on you when I had questions, and you were unshaken. Anytime I came to you with a question, you had an answer or could point me in the right direction, and wish you could stay.
Yeah, I would like to say, I wish you could stay too. But I'm sure that we'll have good guidance with your direction to help her out, get going. And I want to say that, like I've told you before, you're really a breath of fresh air for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.
And I had mentioned that I wanted to show appreciation for our former city manager, Adrian Moore, for leaving us in good, capable hands. And it has been a wonderful couple of months working with Bob. He has a very personable Willits personality where he connects well with people in the community regardless of what the issue is. He hears you out and brings lots of wisdom to the table. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Do we have a refreshment break? Or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so
Refreshment break.
roughly 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and
That's great.
have public comments. All right, we're going to get back to our agenda. That was a nice little break, and it was such a great time to bid Bob a farewell, although he assures us he's going to come back and visit.
Yes.
And of course, tomorrow is Stephanie's first day on the job, so that'll be exciting. Now, so we're back to the public communications. And these are for items that are not on the agenda. If anybody from the public would like to address the City Council on items that you have up to 3 minutes. And if there were lots of you, you could appoint somebody. Anyway, you are allowed to address the city council with any kind of criticisms or whatever you'd like. If they're not items on the agenda, but they're within the purview of the city. Does anybody here want to speak about a non-agendized item?
I just want to add one comment. This wonderful gift for Bob and this evening's reception was put together by Kathy, and I just want to say that every time we have something special for the council, you always go above and beyond, and you're appreciated.
Thank you.
Yes. And quite a few of the staff were here to also thank Bob for his time with us. Okay, so seeing nobody on public communications, we're going to go to public matters, and the first item on that is the presentation from the Willits Youth Advocates on safe routes to school. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Viviana Zuniga, and I'm an 8th grader in Vancouver Middle School.
I'm Karina Brito. I'm a 9th grader at Willits High School.
I'm Lizandra Perez in 7th grade. I'm in Vector Grove Middle School.
How many of you walked or rode your bike to school as a child? Did you know children at Balser Lane aren't allowed to ride their bikes or scooters, and they are discouraged from walking because it isn't safe? We think a better solution is to make it safe.
When we walked around Blosser, we noticed that some sidewalks and streets needed fixing. The sidewalks were either too thin to walk on or not even there. Some streets also needed crosswalks to get across the street safer. We worked with Dusty and the community to update the Safe Routes to School plan through a community workshop. The Safe Routes to School plan would be a great help for us because this lets us apply for grants to get us better sidewalks and make it safer for us to get to school. The pictures above show some sidewalks that are difficult for people to walk on. As you can tell, there are some plants that need to be trimmed. These sidewalks make it hard for people in wheelchairs, strollers, and bicycles. It's the homeowner's responsibility, and many people don't know that. A way to educate the community is by sending a newsletter with their water bill. It's important for people to know about it, but more important for the people who are the problem to be informed. A way for them to know is through a notice of code violation.
We contacted Maureen Mulheron from the Ukiah City Council, who uses the My Ukiah app. The My Ukiah app is an app where people from Ukiah can submit pictures and report issues right from their smartphones. After they report it, it is sent to the city department, and then it is forwarded to the people that need to handle it. We interviewed Maureen about how they got started and if it was a successful, and the questions and answers are in the packet. We think the My Ukiah app can be useful for Willits because it helps the city notify a homeowner when they need to fix something on their property. It also helps the people notify the city when the city needs to fix something.
In conclusion, we want you to apply for grants to fix roads and sidewalks, educate the community about their part in making Willits a nice place to walk and bike. One idea is through sending a newsletter with a water bill, target problem homes by sending notices of code violations. Thank you for your time, and we hope you take this into consideration.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to say I am very pleased to see that young people like yourselves are not just living in Florida. And congratulations for stepping up and being part of the solution. Thank you for that. You're the future.
I have questions.
So is there something we're going to do with this?
Yeah, did you want to?
Yeah, so you had some pictures of some different streets, but do you happen to have, as you walked the routes, do you have a list, a written list of some of the locations?
We do, not with us, but we did a walk and we saw everything there and took pictures. These are just some of the pictures that were on there.
Okay. So I would be interested, and maybe one day when you're out, we could walk the route and identify some places, and maybe first step would be to talk to some of those property owners and see if they would clean up in front. I loved your idea and sharing the Ukiah app with us. That was smart. I like that you gave us solutions to the problem and not just the problem. So good job.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
So is there something we're going to do with this going forward?
Yeah, I wanted to ask if there's some action that the city council and/or the city staff are being asked to do at this particular time, besides the idea of the web access for people that want to report issues. What would?
It says presentation.
Yeah, but I know we wouldn't do it tonight anyway, but.
Madam Mayor, maybe have a more appropriate, I know, Bob, you're on your way out, but
Right.
maybe for, the city has a traffic safety committee made up of the police chief, public works, planning, and maybe this plan could be provided to them so that they could maybe examine it, come back maybe in the future to the council. And obviously, it's more appropriate public works to look at some of this, and obviously code enforcement to be a part of that also.
I like that idea too.
Yes.
That way, because I think for us to get involved at that level, I think it really belongs with staff. If you want it done, it's staff that's going to do it.
Sounds good.
Yep, that does sound good. Okay, well, thank you again for coming and doing something proactive and good for our community. Thank you. So, the next item under public matters is a discussion regarding consideration of the placement of a ballot measure on November 2018 ballot, authorizing an excise tax on permitted cannabis businesses. So I think Bob is going to present this.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, as the mayor indicated, the purpose of this meeting is to consider the placement of a ballot measure regarding authorizing an excise tax for the cannabis businesses. And by way of brief background, in September 2017, I'm sure the council all recalls that the council added section 17.85 to the municipal code. This code section authorizes certain commercial medical cannabis activities to be conducted in town, and that includes cultivation, manufacturing, laboratory testing, distributing, and dispensing. Later in the fall, the council also adopted a schedule of fees for the processing of permits for the medical cannabis activities. And these fees do recapture the costs of processing those permits, and that involves staff time, staff review of the application, staff review of the sites, meeting with the applicants, reviewing security plans, taking a look at their operations to determine what kind of impacts these activities will have on the city. So it was a great thing that the council moved forward and put those schedule of fees in process, or implemented those fees. It's important to note, though, that those fees really do not cover the impacts of the new industry on the day-to-day operations of the city. What kind of operations am I talking about? As a result of the industry, there's a need for increased law enforcement on an ongoing basis. There'll be a need for continual fire prevention and fire protection services. There'll be more traffic in town. That's good and bad in that it does impact our infrastructure and streets. The other is with a new industry like this, there is a potential for impact both on the local economy and to some extent even the social fabric of the community. Other cities in facing these challenges have authorized an excise tax to raise the funds necessary to offset these cost impacts. Should the council wish to place an excise tax on the ballot, it would be an industry-specific tax and would function much like a business license tax imposed upon persons who conduct industry business within the city. This would be a general tax, so it would require a vote of the people, and there is a process that the council would have to go through to place this item on the ballot for November. That would be the next opportunity to place this measure on the ballot. At present, passing that measure would require 50% plus one vote to actually authorize it. The funds, once approved, would be general funds and would be deposited in the general fund, the city's general fund, to offset the costs that I've indicated. I should let you know that there is a ballot proposition that is also pending for the November ballot that would change the requirement in terms of a majority vote for even a general tax. That if that ballot measure is successful in November, it could actually change the majority requirements to a 2/3 majority to pass it, and there is some language there that it would be retroactive. So there is a possibility that even if you put this ballot on, if that ballot was to if you put your tax measure on and the ballot measure changing the majority, it may have an impact as well. But it's just something to be aware of. In considering placing an excise tax on the ballot, there are several different methodologies to consider. In the report, I provided an attachment that gave a range of what those methodologies are. One of those is the application of a flat tax that would apply to each business at a set annual rate, irrespective of the gross sales or the size of the business. So a simple flat tax, you would essentially apply that to every operation, whether it was small or large, or whether it was manufacturing or cultivation. They would basically pay the same flat rate. The advantage of a simple tax is obviously it's easy to calculate, but in some cases it doesn't reflect the fact that larger businesses do treat more or do produce more and should conceivably also pay a higher tax. Gross receipts is another option, and I think you're pretty familiar with that. It is setting a percentage that would be applied to all of the gross receipts that were taken in by a business, regardless of their size. This is a little bit more equitable towards the businesses because obviously a small business would pay less than a much larger business would. Several cities have taken a step at implementing an excise tax that essentially establishes an ordinance form, a tax with an ultimate cap, a percentage ultimate cap. I've seen some cities at 10%, some cities at 15%, and that percentage per gross sales would never get above that. But I've also seen some other cities, including Cloverdale, set the cap, but allow the city to set the tax percentage on an annual basis by resolution. So you might have a cap of 10 to 15%, but the council may choose, because in this case the industry is just getting started, maybe it makes more sense to start at a lower level. For instance, the city of Cloverdale, I think, has a 10% cap, but their resolution for this particular year was 4.5%. So that just gives you an idea of how that works. Other jurisdictions use a rate that is tied to the size of the canopy or their facility, the canopy especially in the cultivation area. That gets a bit complicated because canopies can change, and it will require staff to actually go out and physically collect that information. Some cities use size tied to the size of the state permitted facility on a per square footage basis. I've seen some that would have established $25 per square foot for the first 5,000 square feet of facility, and then a different figure for larger facilities. And I've actually seen some that are a combination of both, square footage and gross receipts. For staff's perspective, I would suggest that you consider the gross receipts because that is easy to calculate. It would be easy to collect the information from audits provided by the businesses, and it would also be equitable because it would be tied to the size of the business. In terms of whether it should be applied to medical versus non-medical, this, of course, is a decision that the council would have to make. At the present time, medical cannabis is the only cannabis that is permitted within the city of Willits. There is potential at some point that the city may want to change that. The suggestion would be that in putting this excise tax in place, you would be silent as to whether it was applied to medical or recreational, for the simple purpose that if you decided to permit recreational cannabis at some point in the future, it would treat it the same as medical, and it would prevent you from having to go back to the voters again.
Just to clarify, we do allow recreational growing only indoors in private residences.
Right, up to 6 plants or whatever is required by law.
We're talking about commercial
Right,
activities.
yes, what is, right,
Yeah.
exactly. Procedure for seeking voter approval. First, if you wish to proceed, it would be important to give direction at this particular meeting. And then the city attorney and the incoming city manager would draft the appropriate documents. It can be done by either ordinance or resolution. Most of the cities that I've seen actually do it by ordinance. Actually, because it becomes a part of the municipal code that way. Then you would, in addition to the ordinance, you would have to draft a resolution which addresses the steps to seek voter approval. And that would include requesting the county of Mendocino to consolidate the election with the November 8th general election, to set the proposed tax rates, approve the ballot language, etc. So it would take probably 2 or 3 meetings to get all of this done. The deadline, if you want to go on the November ballot, all of it has to be done by August 1st. And my suggestion would be that you proceed timely with that, so you're not pushing yourself up against a time limit per se. The council has alternatives to consider. The council hopefully will provide direction and to begin preparing the tax measure and give some idea and give us some direction as to what that tax rate should be. The council could obviously forego at this time placing an item on the ballot, or the council could provide staff with additional direction. A rough estimate of what it's going to cost to place the measure on the ballot, you're fortunate in one respect in that this is a general election, so the costs would be combined with the general election of the county as a whole. So you're not paying just the cost to do a special election per se. And I think there's even a provision that you have to do this during a general election,
Yes,
if I'm
that's right.
not mistaken. So the cost will be about, and this is just a rough estimate on my part, about $10,000 to pay for the county's costs for the ballot measure. As we get a little bit closer to the actual election itself, and the county clerk has a better idea of what kind of measures are going to be on the ballot, you'll have a better idea of what those costs actually are. I want to say that in preparing the report, it's really a combination of the city attorney and myself that collected the information and have brought it to you. So with that, I and the city attorney are available to answer any questions you might have, and we'll take it from there.
Jim, you don't have any specific to add to that? Or?
No, I think you did a very thorough summary, and I just would like to say that we wouldn't be reinventing the wheel here. There's lots of other cities that have done this and that have provided good templates for us to work from. I think I favor the Santa Rosa model and would probably recommend that we draft an ordinance basically consistent with that.
So do we need to have an ordinance drafted before we put an excise tax authorization on the ballot?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So as usual, right now, just clarification questions, and then after we have the public comment period, public hearing open, then we can get into our own views on the matter. So just clarification questions.
Yeah, clarification question. So if we were to adopt the model where, similar to Cloverdale, where you come back every year,
Yes.
does that require kind of like a Prop 218 kind of hearing where people could challenge that, or we just meet as a council yearly and say, hey, look, we hear testimony from the public and say, look, the business is doing great, or it's not doing so good?
It's the latter. You know, we're going to seek voter approval to set a rate probably higher than we're going to impose, and then annually pass a resolution to set the rate underneath that cap.
But at that point, we would just accept public comment or whatever to guide us and listen to staff and then
Yes.
set a yearly. Okay.
Is under our business tax situation, we ask, it's based on gross receipts with certain ranges, right? So we already require businesses to, I guess, self-identify their gross receipts. In this case, I think it would probably be subject to audits as needed.
Yeah, and actually, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe Jim, you can clarify this, but even when, in the case of a business license tied to gross receipts, you still have the ability, I think, to request an audit if you think that you need to, even as it is today.
Well, I was looking today at the city of San Diego's procedures, and what they do in their ordinances require the operators of a business to, on a monthly basis, to submit a city form or a remittance form that identifies what their gross revenues were for that preceding month, and to determine the tax and to submit the form, the verified form. This is what our receipts were. This is the tax we owe. Here's our check, and to do that every month.
We don't necessarily want to do it every month, but yeah.
We don't necessarily need to, but
We can
that's the
decide.
way it's being done in San Diego.
Any other clarifying questions? And otherwise, we'll.
Not clarifying.
Okay, so we will open the hearing. If anybody in the public would like to address this question of us working towards putting an excise tax measure on the ballot in November. Anybody want to address us on this? Okay. we'll bring it up here and we can, yeah, come on, go ahead.
Okay, I'm a little torn. I like the idea, obviously, of a tax. I'm a little torn between the ways of doing it. The gross receipts is probably the most obvious because it's tied into the sales. But there is this issue of the verifying the numbers. And when you compare it to the business licenses, I'm not sure if that's a good comparison because the business licenses are so inexpensive compared to what this is going to be that there's no reason for them to fudge the numbers.
Right.
So there's always going to be that, because when they report their gross sales, it's going to be a direct connection to the amount of tax that they pay. Now, obviously, we expect that they're going to pass through to the customers, but there's going to be some pushback from the customers because ultimately they're going to be competing against the black market that doesn't charge taxes. So there is that balance point. We don't want to kill the legitimate businesses, but we also need to get our fair share of the revenue. The square footage plan to me is kind of appealing only because, it's there. There it is. And the thing is, like, we're looking at a building right now. One of the buildings, I believe, is like a 40,000 square foot building, and we're told that they're going to have a 22,000 square foot canopy. Well, it doesn't really matter for this purpose what percentage of the building they're going to use, because the potential is still there for them to use the whole building at any time they want, and they can do that. So I think it's not unfair. I see you shaking your head no, but I'll ask you for clarification on that later. The potential is still there if we charge them a rate for the entire square footage of their facility. That's like a blanket. And of course, the rate can be reflective of the fact that they're not going to be using 100% of their facility anyway. So, we could play with the number somehow. The only problem with that is that this scenario works well with cultivation, because if you have X number of square feet, you know that potentially you can grow X number of square feet of plant. But when you have a dispensary or shipping or lab or something like that, you don't have that straight connection. So I think that we could probably still use the square foot formula, but we have to come up with a sub-formula that could be, I don't know, let's say, for example, a dispensary can sell X amount of merchandise in so many square feet of space. So that could be translated to a square foot of space for a dispensary is worth, so much in revenue. And we could use that as the formula. But anyway, that's my suggestion.
Those comments. Larry?
Yeah, I prefer the gross rate personally. I just think that that's easier. You're gonna have to pay a little bit of attention to it, but that's a way to do it. And I really kind of like the way, in my limited knowledge of it, the way Cloverdale did it. I think that is a pretty good way to do it, and then charge whatever you want, but you have the top that you can charge, and so you, as a council, you can, if it's not us, on down the line, they can do whatever they want to do. But I just think the growth rate is really the way to go. And I have not talked to anybody from Cloverdale, but I'd be interested in talking to them and seeing how it happened. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Larry. I think I like the gross receipts better. I also want to be fair for the smaller businesses. Some may start out doing tinctures, I've heard that before, or something like that, and they may do killer business in a small area, or they may not, and I think, and also looking at gross receipts would allow us to look at, what's happening in the market with that business. Again, giving us that latitude, but at the same time not stifling any of the smaller businesses that may come out of this. In the end, it may be that, I think I heard that Berkeley lowered their tax rate because it wasn't as big, I guess they wasn't as profitable as they thought they were going to be.
I also tend to go with the idea of doing it on gross receipts because it seems pretty equitable that the smaller the business and the less profit they're making, then they aren't having to pay a huge tax just because they have a certain amount of square footage. And I think the examples, because there's all these different kinds of activities that are permitted, which includes the manufacture and distribution, and I mean, how can you, they're not comparable in terms of square footages, but they all have a certain gross receipts that you can identify, and it seems like a fair way to structure it. Unless we do some kind of hybrid, if there's a hybrid that makes sense, but I just think the square footage of canopy only applies to the growing part of it, and as you said, it's kind of hard to measure canopies and go in there. Anyway,
I think Santa Rosa does have a hybrid. I believe on cultivation, what they say is it's going to be $25 per square foot of cultivation area, not to exceed $25 per square foot, or 8% of gross sales.
yeah, that would be yeah, so it was one or the other with a cap, whichever is lower, I suppose.
Okay,
and-
so,
Yeah, go
good,
ahead.
I'm sorry. So if we went with the gross receipts, how would that be monitored? What would it take?
Well, it would require, I would say that you would probably alert the growers. You probably wouldn't audit every single person, you wouldn't have to on an ongoing regular basis, but I would suggest that you would have to make them clearly understand a part of the process. They'd be subject to an audit at any given time, and you would probably randomly select those audits. And yes, that would require additional staff time. And I'm not absolutely certain as to what that would be, because we haven't had the time yet to really take a look at those cities that are further along with this than we are. But that would be part of your thinking if you went the gross receipts. You'd want to make sure that that rate was going to be sufficient enough that it would do what you needed it to do in terms of offsetting the cost impacts that I mentioned, as well as probably increasing your fiscal staff to be able to do those audits. And I don't know clearly what that would be right now.
Well, don't forget, an excise tax is not the same as a fee that has to be a cost-covering.
Right, it
thing.
doesn't, right.
An excise tax not only covers the cost, but it also covers it's the company paying for the privilege of doing business in your jurisdiction.
Exactly.
And that's like, that's one of those oddball things that it could be anything.
Yes.
And quite frankly, we could have passed an ordinance that banned marijuana in this town, and that would prevent any of these business people from making any money in this town. So there is a privilege and there is ability for them to work in an area that has a market ready for them. So I'm not so overly concerned with just cost recovery.
No, it's
But
not.
still, it gets down to the fact that there is a direct connection between the amount of tax that they're going to pay and the amount of revenue that they report. And human nature says you don't report all the revenue you're going to make because you don't want to pay more taxes.
But, significant underreporting could be something that results in a revocation of a license.
But how would we know that?
Well, if you audited it and
Yeah.
confirmed that.
Okay,
So
but again, we've established that the auditing is going to be a hit or miss kind of a thing. I mean, the IRS reportedly audits maybe less than 20% of their returns. So people are, from what I've heard, there are people who are tempted to game the system and take their chances because the odds are they're not going to be audited. And, you know, that could very well happen here as well.
So I have a question about that, related to this. One of them is it possible to have the audit be something that they bear the price of, the way if we have to have on the fees schedule to cover the out-of-pocket costs, is that something that could be built in or not? We need to find that out.
I could look into that.
And we could have something in there that would be, well, I think they have to keep books anyway, because this is all medical cannabis at this point anyway, before we consider whether we're going to open it up to commercial recreational uses, that they're going to have to account for where their products are going.
To the state as well.
Yeah, they're going to have books that are pretty well-kept, and if we decide, if our staff can do a quick review, that's one thing that doesn't cost us very much, but if we really actually think people are cheating, then I think having them bear the cost of an audit, if there's some, as long as we're not doing, we're not forcing people to have audits every few months or something, that would be onerous, but that they could bear that cost if there's some question about their reporting. Is that something you could look into?
Yes.
Larry?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, Sabrina is next.
Well, we didn't build anything into our ordinance to address an accounting system and just establishing like the basics. Some businesses still just take cash, put it in the drawer and add it up at the end of the day. Others use a cash register. Some people use, point of sale. I think that it would be wise of us to state these, you have to at least have this basic form of accounting system in selling goods. It should be something that's written in.
Was that Mary or
Yes.
Mary?
When this passes, does it affect the fire department also?
Ultimately, the fire department, and they could speak to that more themselves, they'll have additional costs, and then it'll be up to the council as to determine what those budget allocations are. But certainly that would be an allocation that the council should consider.
I thought you were asking if the cost, if it covered their
Yes,
marijuana activity.
Anything
But they're
that,
not doing marijuana, are you?
No, I think that the point is if the
right.
city puts an excise tax and succeeds on the ballot, and we're getting this revenue that's general fund revenue, as opposed to the permit review process revenue, that would we want to have some percent of that excise tax revenue go to the fire department?
That would be a budget decision that the council would want to call out down the road. The problem is right now, you have to avoid making it a special tax.
Yes.
And so you can't be too specific at this point about the uses. You can identify that there are the impacts, and the likely recipients of those proceeds will be, the following departments, but you couldn't really be more specific than that.
So on a sort of more general policy level, I want to agree, as I said before, I think that the gross receipts is probably the fairest way to identify the excise tax. And I think repeating something that Ron said is, I would like it to be not so onerous that these legitimate businesses are really feeling we're trying to milk them for a lot of money when the black market or the underground people that aren't following the rules are still competing with them. So if we have an upper cap, I want to make sure that we're being reasonable with enabling people to do this legitimate businesses and not really just taxing them up there.
I have another thing here. I'm looking through your presentation here. Down at the bottom, under the different taxes, you have the state cannabis taxes. And it's interesting, I just noted here that it's the 15% excise tax, and it's collected by the retailers and paid to the distributors. Now, it seems to me that that's a way to eliminate the need to audit, because ultimately, any product that's made, whether it's, raw plant or a medicine or, whatever, is going to be billed to somebody. The service is going to be billed to somebody, or the product will be billed, and at that point, whatever tax we impose could be put on it at that point, and that's the audit. You ring up a sale, or you write a sales order, and the number is reported, it's there. I think that would probably be the easiest way to go, maybe even to eliminate the need to audit.
Well, I think you're gonna need to audit, because you're always gonna have somebody that's going to try to slide. And so I think that should be some option left to us. And, but I still go back to the same thing. I'm for the gross tax. I just think that that's gonna be the way to go. And, I just think that that's what we need to do.
So,
I guess at this point, sounds like we're kind of mostly in agreement that it should be gross sales. So I would like to make a motion that we ask staff to bring back, I guess, an ordinance and a resolution with the information we've asked for at a future meeting.
I second that.
Okay. And we can always, we don't have to tonight, I don't believe, Bob, unless you think otherwise, actually set the specific
No.
rate. This can be a continuing discussion.
okay,
Larry, you can talk to someone in Cloverdale, or we can do our further research on it, come back with other ideas about what the number should be.
The other thing that I might suggest, Jim, is that in continuing to work with other entities to see how they're approaching the audit question.
Right.
and if they are already collecting some excise taxes, how well the different percents or the different methods of how I think that would be great to not reinvent the wheel and
Exactly.
get the benefit of those experiences. So we have a motion and a second, and any further direction? Otherwise, we'll take a vote. Let's do a.
Who made the second? I'm sorry.
think
I did.
Larry.
Larry.
Public comment?
Yeah, any further public comment? Barbara,
Yes, so
can you come up to? Thanks.
Yes, my name is Barbara Plaza. So all the permits are going to go through the code enforcer, John Sherman?
No, they're going through the planning department primarily. And
Okay.
then there's different staff have different areas of responsibility for the
Because
safety.
John Sherman gives out all the permits, doesn't he?
The building permits, yes, that's correct. But I think well, actually, why don't, maybe John should answer that question.
Yeah, because, I think that he needs to be very fair about giving out permits, especially in building permits, because he gives people permits without having the proper plans and all that stuff.
Okay.
Seriously. That needs to be looked into.
Yes, please come up, and if you could state your name, that's helpful.
So, listen, I kind of like the tier, the hybrid, because if you're growing, and you can go square footage, because there's a lot of reasons, but if at least the city would be covered by the square footage. If plants fail because they mold, there's all these reasons that they fail, but if you go square footage, then you're covered. And then you can do receipts on the sales and the not really into the marijuana, but the
Manufacturer.
distribution, manufacturing. But if you go, that way you're covered on the square footage, because everybody has a reason why it doesn't grow. And they can say, well, I had a big mold problem this year, but at least the city would still get their guaranteed money for that square footage. $25 a square foot would be $1 million on 40,000 square feet, so that would be pretty good, but it's a little too much to ask, for that, but that's just a thought.
I think if we do a square footage, there's a limit of up to 22,000 square feet.
That's right.
So that would be the maximum. Even if your building is bigger, you can't have a bigger.
Correct.
And some of these buildings may have multiple permits. They may have a permit for cultivating on some square footage, and then have a dispensary, and then have a manufacturer. So they may be having multiple kinds of businesses within one building, provided they meet all the... Yes, John, would you like to, please?
To clarify, the cannabis permits are issued through the planner. I don't have anything to do with them other than I approve all of the building issues to guarantee that the buildings are adequate for the use. I am also the code enforcement officer, and in our ordinance, the code enforcement officer actually has quite a bit of responsibility here in that there will be periodic inspections of all of these facilities. And to clarify a point, if they have a 40,000 square foot building, they're still going to have a code enforcement officer in there a minimum of every 90 days. There's really no way for them to start and complete any sort of grow operation that we won't know about. I don't want to start measuring canopy because that's a really labor-intensive issue and subjective as hell, really. But the area used to cultivate is very simple to measure, and it's real easy for us to verify whether they're within the confines of their permit or not. And that's what code enforcement would be doing. The periodic inspections also offer us a window in to see how that applicant is doing with their business. So to address some of the comments that have made, maybe they had a mold problem or something like that, we'll know about that. That's not going to be something that just slides under the table. That being said, I don't really have a position in this at all. But maybe a hybrid for the cultivation side of things might be a bottom line guarantee for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further comment.
Yeah, I just have one more before we vote on this thing. It's just that, the direction we're going to give staff, I am confident that staff will look at all the variations that we discussed and try to figure out ways to get around certain things or to deal with certain aspects of it to come up with the best thing. But I think your direction is go ahead with it.
All right.
So we'll have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes.
Yes.
Weinstein?
Yes.
Can you repeat the motion?
The motion that I've got is to bring back an ordinance and resolution regarding gross receipts procedures for, excuse me, I lost my train of thought.
Or an excise tax.
The excise tax, thank you.
Yes,
And then Bob and I will talk more about this, come up with a stronger motion.
thank you, yes.
Yes. Councilmember Strong.
Yes. All right. So moving on, we have the consent calendar. We didn't get minutes, I don't believe, is that?
No minutes tonight.
So it's just item B, disbursement journals.
I move.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any comments from the public? Any comments from the city council? I think we can do just a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, no opposed. Informational reports, we have building inspection activity reports and business license activity reports. I just noticed in there that our receipts to date, construction valuation to date was really high compared to last year, but this month was not, or the February. So is that because of January? Or?
Yeah, I just have to think it's seasonal, but it's the worst month I've had since I've been here.
Really? That's, but February was really, or January was really good. Okay. But thank you for keeping up with it.
It has a life of its own.
Yeah, doesn't it? Ups and downs, okay. Right to appeal, if anyone is dissatisfied with the decisions of city council, they have a right to review that decision by a court. And the city's adopted section 1094.6 of Civil Procedure Code, which limits generally to 90 days the time within which decisions can be judicially challenged. Commissions, agencies, and authorities, we are not meeting other than as city council tonight, so we're going on to item 8, which is our city manager's reports.
Yes, Madam Mayor, the first item that you have here is the consideration of a resolution authorizing a second amendment to the agreement with Regional Government Services, RGS, for financial services. As the council is well aware, the city's finance director left, the previous finance director left the city in September of last year. The city in the interim has conducted 2 recruitments, and as of yet we've been unable to secure a permanent replacement. In late September, the council authorized the city to enter into an initial agreement with RGS. The purpose of that agreement was to provide financial services. The time period that was given was through January 15th of this year. As I've already mentioned, we were unsuccessful in recruiting a new finance director. So in January, I recommended that contract be extended through March, and there were some additional duties that were assigned. One was assisting with the closeout of the previous fiscal year, and I'm pleased to report that the auditors have been doing their job, and we expect that we'll get an audit by the end of April for that particular year. And also the fiscal services were very helpful in providing the mid-year report. Celia Peterson has basically been providing that assistance. Staff is now recommending that the council consider extending the agreement through the end of the calendar year. The reason primarily for that is you've got the new city manager coming in. They're coming in tomorrow. And she's going to need some time to get her feet on the ground. And also it's going to be a very busy time of the year. One of the very first tasks that's got to be undertaken is the development of the budget for the coming fiscal year. And that will take a lot of the actual last fiscal quarter that you're going to be working with. And as soon as that happens, we're looking to be preparing for the audit of the FY 17-18 year to make sure that that happens in a timely fashion. And that would be done during the summer so that the auditors could come in September. So I'm recommending that the council actually consider extending the contract with RGS through the end of the calendar year. That will permit some continuity within the fiscal area for a period of time. Give the new city manager a chance to get her feet on the ground. I do think there are still a couple of options that are available for the long-term replacement of the fiscal director. I had talked in the past about maybe doing that under contractual services, and that's still a possibility. And the other is with the help of RGS, possibly doing a targeted recruitment. I think the recruitment in part has been based on what we had the budget to do at the time, and perhaps it could have been done a little broader, and by a targeted recruitment actually focusing on those in the profession in the region that are already working at the assistant level or something and are looking to move up. And so that's my recommendation is to allow all of that to occur. You do have an option. The option would be, rather than extending it through the end of the calendar year, you could just extend it through the end of this fiscal year. That would mean that you wouldn't be able to have RGS there to help you out in terms of the actual audit preparation. The cost is for the entire time is $126,000. That would be broken into two parts. One is $41,834 in this fiscal year, and the remainder would have to be budgeted in the next fiscal year. And that's essentially what that impact statement in the staff report is trying to say. As I mentioned, the alternative would be just to approve the contract through the end of this fiscal year. I will say, though, that they work on an hourly basis, so that it's as if Stephanie was working together with the council, the finance committee, etc., able to find a replacement or a alternative that was workable long-term for the city. Were pretty easy access or ability to terminate that contract. So
that, yeah, in other words, the amounts that you're listing is if they use all the hours for that whole time.
Right.
But if, say, in October, we don't need them anymore, we don't keep paying.
Right.
Yeah. So any other clarifying questions?
Yeah, so under fiscal impact, the truncated sentence.
Yes.
That refers to next fiscal year.
The next fiscal year.
All right, so the other question I had is, because the working hours are less than 40 hours a week, and when we first got into this arrangement, it was just enough time to be able to look at certain specific things. So my question is, we're looking at developing the budget and getting ready for the next year's audit, plus I guess there's other normal everyday kind of stuff.
Activities, yes.
Would this be able to be covered under this contract?
Well, it would still be roughly 33 hours a week. My suggestion would be that you move forward with it. If for some reason it didn't seem to be sufficient, the council could take it up again and further amend it. That's a possibility.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question on that. If it were to come, like maybe for closing out the fiscal year at the end of June, we wanted just some very routine bookkeeping help. Does RGS
Yes.
potentially? Okay, so we could
You could.
potentially do a small term contract for some.
Or
workers.
simply, as we did when we prepared this audit, you could add a little bit for accounting staff.
All right, so let's clarification questions. I will open the hearing. If anybody here would like to speak to this item on extending the contract for RGS, Regional Government Services, for our financial help that we're getting. And seeing nobody, we're up here again. Any other questions?
Actually, my question's for Celia. Is this working out? Do you feel like we're giving you enough hours to do what you need to do, or I'm assuming you're flexible with the city manager and
I am working a lot of extra hours at this point in time with pulling together the journals and closeout entries for 16-17 and working with the auditors to go through the audit process. So at this point in time, I am working roughly closer to 40 hours a week than 33. I think as time goes on, I will be better able to provide an assessment of what is needed to adequately support the city's financial function. There's a lot of catch-up that's having to be taken care of right now. And once we get through the audit and we get through the budget, and then we look at year-end close, I think once things are caught up, we'll get a better sense of what is really needed to have the city function on a consistent, steady basis and meet the accounting and reporting requirements that are expected. So,
I look forward to you working with our new city manager and letting her know, so that we'll be able to meet those requirements.
yes, I'm looking forward to meeting and working with her. I thought she would be here tonight, but anyway, I'll be here tomorrow. So
Thank you very
I'll
much.
speak with her then. Thank you.
All right, any other comments or for this? No?
I'd like to move staff's recommendation.
Anyone
Second it.
Okay, looks like we, that corner there. Moved and seconded, if there's no further comment and no further public, let's take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Gonzalez,
Yes.
Stranz,
Yes.
Ornstein,
Yeah.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mayor Strong.
Yes. All right, thank you, Bob. All right, we have another one coming.
Yeah, we've got, you've got three resolutions, items that are before you. We'll go through this one at a time. The first is consideration of and a possible adoption of a resolution supporting the passage of Proposition 69 and opposing the repeal of SB 1. As the council is very aware, in last year's legislature, the legislature passed and the governor signed SB 1. The SB 1 provides $5 billion annually for the repair and rehabilitation of local streets and roads. Every city throughout the state is benefiting from this funding. And I've got to say that most municipalities, like Willits, are struggling with getting their road work done. And the street infrastructure is probably one of the most important pieces of infrastructure that we have. If you take a look at the amount of money that we're receiving, it will probably grow over a 10-year period. The state estimates that, or I should say the League of California Cities estimates that over a 10-year period, we're likely to receive $1.3 million. So that's a significant boost, especially to our local budget. I will mention that we are one of the few states that actually approved its own half-cent sales tax. And as a result of that, you're getting an extra $100,000 out of this program. The city, yeah.
Okay.
One of the few cities in the state,
Yeah.
8 cities in the state that actually passed that half-cent sales tax. In recognition of that, you're getting an extra $100,000 per year right off the top that no other cities get. At this point, as you know, we've got a project that is already on the books, and we're looking to do the pavement preservation program later this year that will use a good portion of this money. It'll use the initial $124,000. That will be matched by our own half-cent sales tax for a full project budget of $224,000. This kind of a project wouldn't be as easy, or I won't say easy, but wouldn't be as accomplished. We would have a difficult time accomplishing it with our current revenue sources. And so the purpose of Prop 69 is actually, it'll appear on the June ballot, is to prohibit the state from taking money out of the SB 1 fund to solve other budget problems. As the council is aware, that the state has had a habit of doing that over the years. So the Proposition 69 is simply to prohibit other uses besides transportation for these dollars. The other is there is also a measure that is pending for November that may, if it were successful, repeal SB 1. So the attached resolution is really in support of 69, the prohibition of moving that money for other uses, And then the other part of that is actually opposing the potential ballot measure in November that would repeal SB 1. So the recommendation is that the council adopt the attached resolution supporting 69 and opposing the repeal of SB 1.
I have one question, and that is, in your fiscal impact statement, you say it could adversely impact the city in the amount of 250,000, actually it's got an extra zero, but
Yeah, it does.
250,000, is that
Per year,
per
roughly.
year? Pretty much ongoingly?
Yeah, because you have to think, you have two components of this.
Yeah.
The 100,000 plus the allocation of SB 1
Yeah.
on
So it would be every year?
every year.
Wow, okay. Any other clarification questions?
Yeah, in your agenda summary, the next to last paragraph, where it says Prop 69 prohibits the legislature from rating new transportation funds, et cetera, is that a literal translation, or I'm looking at the word new?
I think the new actually references SB 1. SB 1 is relatively new.
Okay, but this would not affect existing transportation funds.
The repeal of SB 1?
Well, the Prop 69.
Yeah, Prop 69 would prevent the state from rating other older funds, I assume. Is that the case? Because there are other funds that have been in existence.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if the wording is that specific.
I think it is specific to primarily, and maybe Jerry participate.
I think it's more related to SB 1,
I
because
do
I think that
as
the
well.
issue is that here the legislature went ahead and took a leap of faith. In essence, it's a gas tax and also a tax on registration, and obviously there are those folks that are going to be not wanting to pay those, whether at the pump or at the registration, but they don't want to lose the confidence, for the public to lose confidence that those funds would be diverted to something else, in which case the voters would then be emboldened to say, we want to get rid of this. This is a kind of move to basically say these funds are secure.
Well, I get that, but, again, the devil's in the details, and I'm just curious if the wording of the measure is that specific, that's going to prevent the state from rating old existing transportation funds.
I don't think so.
You don't think?
I could be wrong, but I think it's specific to SB 1. I don't think, the old gas tax and the highway fund that we've seen things juggled around over the last several years. I don't think that would necessarily, protection would extend to those funds.
I mean, there's nothing we can do about it here, but that seems like a huge hole in the whole argument. The other kind of a related question is, I haven't seen the budget in a while, but as I recall, we had something like $700,000 in the half-cent sales tax fund.
That's correct.
Do we have any projects planned?
I don't have the CIP, yes, but I don't have the CIP in front of me. There is a list of street projects there I'm aware of.
Because we haven't had any, I guess, in South Street or Central, is that right?
Actually, I'm trying to think. There is one that they're working on now.
Okay.
And it'll probably be going out to bid after the new fiscal year.
Okay, good.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it could be actually that one.
I think it's Redwood, up there in the Redwood,
Okay, but the point is, we're still actively...
Yes, and one of the things I'll say about that, and I know it'll be, and it's one of the things that maybe I'll cover a little bit later tonight. I think, and it's one of the comments that I made to the new city manager, I think you need to spend more time on that CIP. I think that CIP needs to be more robust. And you really need to take it to heart when you're reviewing your budget and even during your mid-years, and so that you're updated on where those projects all are.
Yes, and that will relate also to developing our priorities and kind of strategic planning. and kind of reassessing those because that all fits together.
Yes,
Is the CIP carrying out those
Right.
priorities? Yeah.
right.
I agree, that's important. So if there's no other clarifications, anybody in the public like to address us on the question of our endorsing Proposition 69 and opposing the repeal of SB 1? If not, we have it up here, and we have to make a motion to adopt staff recommendation.
I'll make the motion.
We don't need two separate ones, just all in one, yeah, one resolution.
At a time, yeah.
But I mean, this has two aspects, but. okay.
Yes, no,
So
just one
Jerry-
resolution. yes.
Jerry
We're
has
both
moved?
together, one resolution,
Yeah,
yeah.
Jerry moved. Anybody want a second?
Yeah.
Okay, Jerry seconded. And do we don't need a roll call vote.
No.
So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Okay, going on.
Now, this one, the next one is consideration of a possible resolution in support of SB 5, Proposition 68. That, I will clarify, is also on the June ballot. It's not on the November ballot. That will do a number of things. It's actually a bond issue, and the bond issue would be in the amount of $4 billion, and it would go to support a variety of different programs, including parks and water projects, as well as projects that are related to the sustainability of the climate. I will note, in the middle of that paragraph in the staff report, it says $200,000 per capita. Actually, that's the park grant, and I should clarify, when it is a per capita grant, but it would be a minimum of $200,000. So, because we're a smaller city, if this is approved, we would see a $200,000 grant that would be non-competitive for park-related improvements. That's a big one for the council to consider. Water projects are always good to have too, but certainly improvement to the parks would help.
All right. Any clarifying questions?
Yeah, I'm a word wonk, as you can tell. And at first I was excited when I read this sentence, that these funds would be available for Willits to use for either park improvement or rehab.
Mm-hmm.
A total of $1.19 billion would be available for water projects. That's pretty awesome.
That's across the state.
Oh, okay. That's not how I read it.
I'm sorry.
We'd have some nice parks, Ron.
And
If you don't ask, you don't get, right?
So the 1.19 billion statewide, is that going to then be competitive as opposed to the?
My impression is that it will be.
Okay. So the 200,000 is kind of, we get that.
That would be it, yes.
All right, that's very cool. Anybody in the public like to comment on this item? These are basically endorsements of things going on statewide, taking positions on them. Any other comments from the council members? If not, I hear a motion for staff.
I'll move staff's recommendation.
You're going to be responsible for all this stuff, you know.
I'll second.
Okay. Moved and seconded, and if there's no further discussion, let's have a vocal vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, moving on to the next one, which is a similar, taking a position on a statewide issue.
And this one is possible adoption of a resolution supporting SB 3. It's the Veterans and Affordable Housing Act of 2018. And this is, SB 3 will be on the November ballot. It's called the Affordable Housing Bond Act. Again, it's the selling of bonds and the support of housing projects. The projects that are called out is primarily a Calvet project, as well as a large amount for affordable housing. $1 billion would be to provide home loans to eligible veterans at below market interest rates with no down payment requirements. The program would also provide an additional $1.5 billion for multifamily housing administered by HCD. And I should mention that what comes into play here for the city is getting that housing element done, hopefully soon, because without that housing element done, it would preclude you from applying for any HCD projects. So, but staff is recommending that the council also approve this resolution.
I have one question on all three of these that are going on the statewide ballot. Are they all basically majority vote rather than?
Yes.
Yeah, so they don't require
No.
2/3. Okay. Any other clarifying questions? Does anybody in the public want to address this question of the housing statewide? Okay, I think we can have a motion. If there's no
Go ahead, Jerry.
other- Look at Jerry.
You're on a roll. I'll move
Oh, you're going to
to adopt
Good.
staff's recommendation.
I'll second.
All right, shake it up. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No, okay.
Now, Madam Mayor, if I could,
Yes.
I'd like to give you a verbal report, and if you can bear with me for a few minutes, I just wanted to, because this is my last meeting, point out some observations and some recommendations and discussion of some of the projects that we're currently dealing with. I have also put all of this in writing and provided it to the incoming city manager, and I'm sure she would make a copy of that available to the council. But in the beginning, at the beginning of this meeting, the council actually thanked me, and I'm very appreciative. And this is absolutely wonderful. It'll make me, I will think about Willits often as I am at home, but I also wanted to thank the council and the community for the last 4 months. I really appreciated yours and the community's acceptance. It really allowed me to feel welcome and feel a part of the community, and it was a privilege to be able to both serve the citizens and the city. So I wanted to thank you for that. In terms of some of my outgoing words, starting at the top, last Friday, the mayor and Councilmember Gonzalez and I attended the League of California Cities meeting. And the one thing I will say is that leading this off, it's important to continue that advocacy. The reason I say that is because, you know, especially as a small city, the only way that you're going to make your voice heard is in being in league with other like cities throughout the region. And a small city has impacts or deals with impacts that larger cities don't. And so, and to a certain degree, realistically, you have to push harder. I hate to say that, but in order to get the things done that you need to get done, you have to push harder. A couple of things that came up that I just wanted to mention. You need to always keep vigilant, and I know that this council has talked about it in the past, but it's unfunded, mandated programs coming from the state. I think the one-size-fits-all is just doesn't work, especially in a state of this size. And I know to a certain degree, it's, you know, small voices have a greater difficulty having their voice heard. But I will say that you gotta continue to be very vigilant with that. We see those impacts all the time. One that comes to mind, we're dealing in the water department with the development of those inundation maps that actually resulted from Oroville. And again, it's a one-size-fits-all. It's going to end up, those maps will probably end up costing the city $120,000. Now, that's mostly going to come out of the waterfront. Maybe we'll be lucky and get some grant dollars to assist with that. But that's where water rates and why water rates end up going up is just for those reasons. Sometimes we can't control all of our costs. The other is the loss of redevelopment, especially for a small town like this. It's really been traumatic. It ends up, you're embarking on a huge program with the relinquishment of the streets, and to have lost redevelopment in that mechanism is really a shame. In our meeting on Friday, we did hear from Assemblymember Wood, and Assemblymember Wood said that at least while we've got the current governor, you can't expect any change in that regard, but you might next year. So, and redevelopment won't come back as it was, but it'll come back in some form, hopefully, and it'll benefit the city. So I would say to continue to be vigilant. Speaking about the relinquishment, the next phase is right around the corner. It's only a couple of months off. And, it is going to be felt by the community. There's no doubt about that. The better that you can work together to prepare yourself for that impact, the less hurtful it will be. I think you've done some good things. You've identified and the downtown, the Main Street program, which outlines some concepts for you. And, my suggestion is that you stay true to those. You have a vision. You have some good partners. I mean, with Revive Ed, Visit Willits, and the city and the chamber, they all need to be working together to try and once you get to the other side, having lived through it before, and you will get to the other side, I think the city will really benefit, and you'll see a difference. Talking about planning. We've talked about it here at the council a good number of times, but as you enter into your goal session, getting that general plan update is going to be a major undertaking. Your current general plan was approved in 1992, and I think your zoning map is almost that old, and so you're going to need to update that. And along with those, you're going to need to update your development code. And I mentioned that briefly. Right now, as you look at your land use designations, a lot of your permitting requires conditional use permits. And you're not given the flexibility to get around that in any way. If you take on the development code and revise it, especially with your newer zoning designations, you can spread permitted uses out within those zones a little bit more, so they become over the counter rather than going through the traditional hearing process. And that'll be more business friendly, and that will help get things along. You need, in concert with the general plan, you need the economic development strategy that you'll need to complete. That will, with the fact that you've got the new marijuana ordinance coming on, our business coming on, you've got to also be concerned, and I know you are, about the other businesses in town, and the strategy will help you come up with ways to make those help those businesses be successful. Sphere of influence needs to be adjusted. I know that Dusty is working on that, but with the sphere of influence adjusted, then you can begin thinking about annexations, and that will be an important part of your future, I think, as well. Budget, we talked a bit about that. You're going to get started with that very soon. The first thing that I know you'll undertake is the goal setting, and that's a real opportunity to work with the community and focusing on what your budget is all about. As we've noted, sales tax is doing okay this year, and hopefully that will continue. Although you're going into what could be the toughest quarters given the oncoming relinquishment. So just a point to keep in mind. We talked about the excise tax tonight, and you've given direction to proceed with it. And that has the potential to add additional revenue to the general fund, which will help in a variety of ways. One, I mentioned fire, I mentioned police, I mentioned public works, parks and actually planning. But the other thing you might think about, depending on what those returns look like, you may think about cutting a little bit out of that to develop an incentive, a business incentive program. There's nothing to say that you can't use general fund dollars for a business incentive program. You can't use it as a gift of public funds. You can't do that. But I don't think there's anything that would keep you from coming up with some kind of low-cost loan program that might be used to assist businesses that are coming in, especially with improvements that may need to be done in the downtown area. So just an idea to think about. One other thing that you may need to think about is actually, as you consider the future health of your budgets, I would think about considering development impact fees. And the only reason I suggest that is you have to be a little bit careful about ensuring that development pays its fair share of your infrastructure. If you don't, what happens is those costs end up being picked up by the current citizens, and you don't want that to happen. So just another idea about that. Also, in looking at, you've got some good things coming up. You have that RFP was completed for the watershed salvage project, and that'll be back before you at your next meeting for award. And that would get that salvage project underway by this summer. And there is some real process that you could actually get some residual revenue from that could go back into the water fund and could be very helpful. As some of the council knows, we have been working on an issue with perpetual energy. We've identified that perhaps they have been overcharging us for a number of years, and that has a real prospect, if that moves forward, to also bring revenue back to the water fund. So you've got some real opportunities for positive things out there. In terms of staffing, just a couple of comments. Number one, I think you got a great staff at all levels. Whether that's the folks out in the yard, the public works guys, and up through senior management, et cetera, that police department, everybody is really working hard. And what I've really enjoyed is that they have an overall dedication to the community and the city. That's not always something that you find. A couple of things relative to that in preparation for your budget. It's never a bad thing to do a salary comparison. You need to know where you are in terms of how the salaries you're paying and where you sit within the region. Not so much that you may be able to accomplish that, but at least it gives you some target to think about. And I think your budget will improve. And as it does improve, keep thinking about building in capacity. What I'm talking about in terms of capacity is that as you've gone through the hard times, a lot of your support staff positions have been eliminated. And so you need to think about bringing some of those support staff positions back, because those are the ones that really enable the management to get the job done at the top. A couple of specific things. You're needing and we're working to add planning staff through, we've got a recruitment that will be completed here in the next 3 weeks. As you add staff, you may want to think about changing your planner position back to a community development director position, because that planner position is going to take on more responsibility. And finally, in Public Works, I really think you need a Public Works director. I know you had one when Rod was here and he's left, but you might want to think Public Works is such an important place. You need to think about adding that staff back in at some point. As I've said, I have passed all of this on to Stephanie, and I'll be meeting with her tomorrow, and I'm sure answering a lot of questions. You know, I hope that you take these observations in the way that they're meant, and you know, it's to be helpful more than anything else. And I just want to thank you again for the opportunity, and I certainly hope that I'll make it back here for Frontier Days, because I really want to be here for that. So any questions of me? That's a lot of information. Thank you.
And I appreciate that you have basically a lot of this in writing, and as we go forward, it's an awful lot on our plate, our collective plate, and all the staff who keep this place running. And Stephanie's going to have to hit the ground running.
Yeah. You know, I'm just wondering, I know you passed this on to Stephanie. I'm wondering if you could copy all of us as well, because this has to be a group effort to make sure that we keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Be glad to.
Good, thanks.
Thank you very much.
That's it for me for my report. I think that's enough.
Well, just coming back. Okay, so we've passed a lot of resolutions, verbal report. Now we're on department recommendations. Administration, Kathy, do you have anything?
Yes, try to get through this without crying. Bob has been a godsend for us, and I think I can speak for all staff that we feel that way. He came in at the time that we needed somebody to really know what they were doing, and he did. So thank you. And I'd also like to thank Dolores Peterson for filling in for me at the last meeting so that I can have vacation. Yes.
That's it? Okay. Finance, do you have anything additional?
No.
Okay. Human resources is not here. I guess there's nothing to report there. And legal, do you have anything for us?
Oh, just want to publicly announce that the city was served with a lawsuit from a Jeanette Brown against the city alleging ADA violations and denial of access to public facilities we've referred that to REMIF, and REMIF has assigned counsel to provide a defense.
Thank you. Public safety. Yes.
Scott Warnock, Chief of Police. Like I mentioned a month ago, once a month, I want to present some stats to kind of give you, the council and the people, an idea of what the police department does. So I chose some stats to share today. In 2017, the total calls for service to the police department were 10,437. And that's everything from attempt murder to a parking ticket. So it's a variety of things, and we made 453 arrests. 2018, so January 1st to today, there have been 2,350 calls for service and 95 arrests. That compared to the same period last year, from January 1st, 2017 to March 14th, there were 1,676 calls for service and 82 arrests. So that's, I think it's around 119% of what we had last year. I reversed that, but you know what I mean.
There were more last year
yes.
than this year. So.
Yeah, we had more this year. So if the trend continues, it looks like we will, by the end of the year, have about 12,400 calls for service. And when we're fully staffed, that's 1,000 calls per officer. Right now, we're not fully staffed. Technically, we still have one position, and we have 3 trainees that don't count as officers because they're.
Question on that.
Yes, sir.
Do you see a causal effect of some sort, or is it just statistics?
It's just today's times, I guess. I don't know what it is. It could be a difference in weather for this time of year than it was last time of year. Mm-hmm. We've been trying to figure it out ourselves.
Okay.
And of those 10,000, in 2017, of those 10,437 calls for service, 494 were assist to outside agencies. So assist to outside agencies include, I don't know if you realize that we respond to emergency calls in brook trails when the sheriff's department's not available. We have quite a few of those. We also respond for the CHP when their units are not available or in the area to accidents on the freeway or in the county. To be the initial units to arrive for life-saving, et cetera, until they can get there. We also, in that 494 includes calls to cover other agencies, including CHP and the Sheriff's Department when they don't have enough units. They also, both those agencies also assist us when we need help. Some of those calls are also covering units that are within our jurisdiction from other agencies. So if they make a traffic stop and they need assistance, we assist them within the city. So, any questions on?
I have a question. Is there, I know there's obviously an exchange of helping each other in different circumstances and depending on who's closest to being able to respond. But is it tracked in any way, and is there any, for example, recompense to the city if we're doing calls in the county area?
No.
No.
No, we also, I meant to add, we also respond to calls in the valley when the sheriff's office is not available.
So we just assume that it all comes out even somehow over the big picture because...
It doesn't, but yeah, we assume that.
Yeah, I mean, because that is a significant part of our budget is our police services, and if we're doing a fair amount of time spent outside of our jurisdiction...
It doesn't, I shouldn't say it doesn't take away funds from us, but it takes away services. So if we're responding to something, say on East Hill Road, an emergency, we only have 2 units usually on at a time. So they're both going to be there. So we're not covering the city. So we're not covering the people who pay for those services.
Well, I'm pretty sure we don't want to start keeping score.
No,
That's going to
no, I'm not
nowhere.
recommending that at all.
Right.
A lot of people aren't aware that, a lot of people see us in brook trails or in the valley and wonder, well, what's Willits PD doing? This is not the city. So we provide those services. They do help us as well,
Yeah.
so.
Yes, I know they do.
That's mutual aid.
So, what I would like to offer to you, the council, is if you have any particular questions for the next stats, if you're curious about how many of these we do, or whatever, I'm sure I can't think of everything, I'm happy to try to work with those stats, so.
Madam Mayor, if I could, I was just going to ask the chief, how is, on another subject, how's the Nixle installation coming along?
We were supposed to have a meeting, online meeting today with them, and there was some miscommunication, and so we didn't have that meeting today.
But you expect, how long before it'll be operational?
I'm hoping within a few weeks. And then we'll start marketing and making people aware that they can sign up for the services. Now, the reverse 911, they don't have to sign up for, but they can sign up for different levels of the service.
That would might be one where we might want to go through the water bills.
Right, and that's one of their suggestions. That's one of their services they provide to us, is they're going to help us market it. They're going to help us they're not going to do it, they're going to give us ideas of what other agencies and cities and counties have done to market it. And one of the things was the water bill.
And it's essentially a reverse 911, but it's another level of it. It's slightly different.
Right. So generally, the reverse 911 goes. We will provide them with the database of our 911 system. So when there's an emergency, like we've pursued somebody into a neighborhood and they're armed, we can select that area to notify people via reverse 911. Now, with the other part of the system, people can sign up their cell phones. They can sign up their cell phones for reverse 911 too. But for text messages, etc., for everything from a street closure, or there's going to be work on this street, this street's closed because there's a fire, the fire department will be able to use it, the road crew will be able to use it through us, missing child, things like that. And you don't have to constantly get bombarded with messages, because you can set, the person who signs up can set the level of the notification.
I just want to have a question that, as you're passing on many of your thoughts for the next city manager. After the fire, we talked a lot about our emergency plan, and then as time's passed by, that's kind of been pushed to the back. And so one thing I'd like to see from you is maybe some updates as to how we're progressing with that, because I'm getting those questions from the community.
Right, the city manager has mentioned it to us. One of the interim chiefs, Don McCory from Sausalito, he was looking at it, and he did it for the city of Sausalito, updated their emergency plan, and with a hired consultant, it took them 8 months to do it. So it's not something that's an overnight thing.
Right, I just want to see that we've started it and kind of where we're at.
We've thought about it.
Process.
So that's where I'm at. I will put it on my calendar I'm blocking things on the calendar to get caught up on, because some things weren't done while I was gone. So.
And it is on the list, you'll note.
Oh, okay.
Well, you asked if there were things that we wanted to be updated.
Yeah, there you
No, I said stats. I didn't say anything, no. Anything. I'm happy, I know you guys are careful not to contact me, some of you aren't careful, to contact me with questions. That's what I'm there for, to answer any of your questions. You just can't, like I said, you can't tell me what to do. So.
Okay. When it comes to budget.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you, Scott. All right, community development, I know that
Dusty
is on vacation. I'm sure he needed that vacation.
Is he still working here? Yes. I haven't seen him in a while.
Oh my gosh, he finally took a vacation, it's great. And building enforcement, and yes. John.
Yeah, we miss him desperately already. As far as building, we touched on this earlier. February was the slowest month since I've worked here. so that's 10 years at this point. I don't have any explanation for it. We're, as a community, we're in turmoil, but we're starting to turn around. There's a lot of interest in developing housing here. There's a lot of interest in upgrading our commercial stock. We're just not in the process right yet, but we're working on it. And to that effect, to that end, I actually had a meeting with a large property owner today that may have changed his plans and may have decided to develop a piece of property with some housing that has sat idle for probably about 20 years. So, we are making progress. It's just not up and on the top of the table yet. We are almost completed. We're working on the last 3 houses in the Hale Creek subdivision. But the good news is that the developer's got a new project they're working on, and they have hired Alan Falleri as their planning consultant, and they're moving ahead. So
This is moving forward?
we're making progress.
So beyond the Hale Creek subdivision, another project?
Yes, yes. There's a lot of interest. I've been fielding a lot of phone calls on the various vacant parcels around town. To be fair, we've got a really kind of jumbled up zoning code that tends to get in our way more than it does help us out. So there, you know, I think you should expect in the near future a lot of approaches for conditional use permits to build things that aren't necessarily permitted in that zoning. But I think if you look at them, you'll realize that the zoning's not really appropriate for the location, and that maybe the proposed construction on there is appropriate when the zoning would tend to block them. So we're working in that direction. As far as code enforcement, I've been busy. I've been busy. But we're making progress. And we had a tremendous effort this last month on the part of a number of property owners to clean up impacted properties. And to say that they're successful is a mild statement, because I have gone by some properties that look pristine that 3 weeks ago you would have said, you know, we just need to run these people out of town or something, you know, we can't put up with this. And I made contact with them, and like I said, it's kind of amazing to me how much. Another point is I recently had a meeting with the owner of the Clark Trailer Park, and there are plans, and he basically agreed to everything we talked about. He's going to be making upgrades, cleaning the place up, bringing up to a position where he could say, I am being a good neighbor. So,
This is great.
So that's kind of where we're at this point.
Can you talk about the Carlin Apartments, how that's, I was really excited to read the article in last week's Willits Weekly about who's taking it over and what they're planning on doing. Is there anything more to add to it from that article?
The scheduling, it's ongoing. The weather has thrown us a curve right now, but we're in the midst of the asbestos and lead paint removal process. As soon as that's done, then I can issue a demolition permit. We have to get the hazmat out before we can do that.
But is there any plans yet? I know they were sort of nebulous at the time. Anything been firmed up for development?
Yeah, without
Okay.
going beyond what I should say, there's multi-unit housing proposed.
Cool.
So it's looking good.
Yeah.
The parking lot on the corner of Commercial and Main Street, or where people park, with those cinder blocks around the edge,
Yeah.
is that something that the property owner put there out of choice, or is that something that the city asked for those?
The city asked him to put those
For
there.
those to be there?
Yeah.
People were cutting through
Right, the reason I ask is as we're looking forward at a beautification project for downtown, I was curious as to who the owners of those cinder blocks are in coming up with some ideas on how to beautify them so that they blend in with the community.
I quite frankly don't know who owns the K-rail. I could call Rich and find out.
Okay, I would be curious in connecting to see if we could create a project that would make those more eye appealing.
And I know you've been hearing about this for too long, but we really are close with the Willits Cafe. The antennae have all been relocated at this point. They're not on the building any longer. That was pretty much the issue that was stopping us, is that we didn't want to put InstaWave out of business, and removing that antenna before we had a new location for it would have literally just cut their signal until they got the new location. So the antenna's being remounted in the new location.
What's the plan for the signage for the restaurant? Has anybody addressed that? Or has the owner thought about that? Have they considered?
We're going to take the restaurant down.
No, the sign, the large sign, says the Willits Cafe.
Well, my assumption is that we remove that with the restaurant.
Okay. I was just curious if they were just going to demolish it, take it off to the dump, or whether they had approached the museum about whether or not that might be something that
I don't know, but that's something I'll talk to Rich about.
Just
I mean,
a
he's a
thought.
very community-minded guy.
Yeah, just a thought, you never know.
And he has offered, there's some kind of heritage agave plants over there, and he's offered to make those a gift to the city if we can come up with a place where we can plant them, where they'll be able to stay. He doesn't really want to see them bounced around or put in a location that's not appropriate. But I think that's kind of a neat deal, because as long as I've been around, those have been kind of an icon there, and everybody I know kind of refers to those cactus. Once we tear down the building, that we don't want to just lose those as part of the community. It's sort of like the redwood logs we dug up when we were building the hospital. Now they're part of the landscaping at the hospital. So.
And can you give us an update on Remco? Is there any change since you last reported?
I can tell you that they have hired an architect, and they're working on subdividing the tall building at the west end of the site there into lease spaces. That's a fairly clean deal. That's the newest and the cleanest on the inside building. And that would be fairly easy to turn into lease spaces, but no plans on the rest of it yet.
How soon is that likely to come to?
Well, they just went into a design phase.
Okay. Not for a while. So if that's it for your report, we still have an item here about possible resolution authorizing code enforcement officer to file a special assessment on property located at 260 East San Francisco. Are we ready to move to that item?
I am.
Great. Are you going to present it, or is Bob?
The building official will.
Okay, thank you, John. John, go ahead.
Mayor and council members, this is a case that's gone on for quite a while. In fact, since June of 2017. It really, it's a matter of an unpaid water bill turning into a shut-off, turning into tampering with our system. That bill finally got paid. Then the same thing basically recurred a few months later, a couple of months later. This led to quite a bit more activity on the site, where I discovered that there was an illegal residence in the backyard, that once California Health and Safety Code 17920.3 identifies substandard housing conditions, and one of those conditions is that a home have running water, hot and cold running water, for sanitation purposes. And at this point, that home had gone for weeks without water at all. And I condemned the home for that reason, that they didn't have sanitary facilities. Basically, they didn't have a water supply for their sanitary facilities. After that, the occupants actually covered my condemnation notices and continued occupying the house. Then, let's see, then there was an incident where I went by and there was a water truck in the driveway. And, you know, I understand Mr. Walker's intention was to resupply his house with water. And in his mind, that satisfied the need for sanitation, et cetera. The water truck wasn't even certified for potable water. It was something you'd use out in the woods to water roads with. So I contacted one of the occupants of the home, Mr. Tony Knight, and explained to him that that was not an acceptable water supply. It had to be disconnected immediately. There was no backflow prevention device between the house system that was being charged from this water supply and our city system, and in that case that endangers our city system in that a backflow could put unsanitary water into our system and contaminate our system. The water truck was removed. A while later, I went by and noticed again there was an ATV of some sort with a little trailer behind it parked in the carport with a plastic water tank in it. At that same time, about that same time, I was receiving phone calls from neighbors complaining that Mr. Walker had been connecting his hose to their hose bibs in the middle of the night and filling his water tank to supply his house. Now, this water tank was connected via a swimming pool pump and some garden hoses to the house. Again, I've told them, this is not an approved water supply. There's no way for us to guarantee that that's sanitary water. And we have a water system in this town. He's clearly avoiding paying his bill by carting his own water in. So again, I could put condemnation notices on the house, and again, the occupants, in defiance of those notices, actually covered the notices with no trespassing signs and continued living in them. That's pretty much the situation as it exists today. I issued a compliance order in October to stop this, for them to vacate the condemned house, for them to vacate the illegal dwelling unit in the backyard. Essentially, I got no response. This compliance order included administrative fines if the period of 7 days that I gave them for compliance went by without compliance. It went by with no contact, and eventually $10,500 in fines were accrued before Mr. Walker attended an administrative hearing in this building before our administrative hearing body. After that hearing, the administrative hearing body issued an administrative order directing me to collect $10,500 in administrative fines and to collect $1,500 in basically the cost of the hearing. I invoiced Mr. Walker, and more than 90 days later, that invoice had received no response at all. I'm coming to you for the authorization to go ahead and take the costs of enforcement and file a special assessment lien against the property for those, and send the administrative fines to a collection agency for collection.
I think you should let me speak first, George.
Yeah, we hear the report first, yeah. So that you're asking us to potentially a special assessment in the amount of $2,700, a lien against the property, and then the rest of it would be going to a collection agency.
That's correct.
Okay. So are there any questions for John before we open the public hearing?
Yeah, just for context, because this sort of an action can look to the uneducated eye as governmental overreach. So could you kind of explain, and don't take it wrong the way I'm stating it, you know, I understand, you know, what I'm looking at, is what is the right that the city has to demand that, or require that, you know, there's potable water, that, you know, the kind of things that you wrote them up on. Why is that our business?
Well, number one, it's in the California Health and Safety Code. Number two, it's in the California Plumbing Code. Those are both adopted by ordinance into the Willits Municipal Code.
These water issues that you cited?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they're code issues.
Okay.
The property without an approved, and that's a quote from the code, an approved water supply cannot maintain sanitation. The code says it's not a habitable structure without that.
And that applies to the water truck and the water tanks and borrowing water from the neighbors' hoses?
Well, obviously, a water truck that's not certified for potable water is not an acceptable or an approved water
Right.
source. And you would need approval for that beforehand, not after the fact. And neither is a plastic water tank and a swimming pool pumping some garden hoses.
So just for argument's sake, if a water truck or a tank was certified, there would be a process that would have to be gone through to certify these devices?
Well, yeah, there's a standard
Okay,
procedure for certifying a vessel for potable water. Now, an application could have been made to this department for approval to use that water truck as an interim water supply, and that might have been granted.
Okay. I just want to get that clear, because those are options. It's just that all these things have been circumvented. So you're saying that it's potentially possible that if the certification was made, that, and, you know, approved and everything, that a water truck or a tank could be parked in the driveway to supply water? In other words, there's no requirement that a city resident uses city water?
There has to be a backflow.
Well, there's the backflow.
I'm not aware of a requirement that, well, our water code basically says that if you're within 300 feet of our water system and you don't have a well, then you're required to connect to our system. That's not the statute I'm using.
And I would be willing to bet that it's more expensive to park a water truck in your driveway than to use city water. But that's just me.
I haven't done the math.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Okay.
So, yes, that was the next thing. What we're going to do is open the public hearing. So I think if there's no other questions of John, we will open the public hearing. We might need you to clarify things again afterwards, yeah. Okay, please.
I want to thank you very much. Yes. When Mr. Sherman first came to my house, I told him I had water.
Who are you?
Dan Walker. I have water. I get water from my mom. She owns 225 East San Francisco Avenue with the property the food banks on, which she gives a good rate to their rent. And I told him I had water. He didn't want to hear that. I have water to flush my toilet. I went only 2 days without water, not even that long without water. Okay, I put the water truck in my driveway. He told me I couldn't have it there. I removed it. He says, I said, you mean, I have water. He goes, well, that's not it. It's not, you don't have a backflow system. What's the backflow system for?
To keep your water from getting into the city's water supply.
Which, the sewer?
No, the
Well, how's
city's
it going to
water.
get the city water
ci-
supply
no,
when they pull the meter out?
If you're connected to the city water supply with your water tank, it's possible that whatever water you have in your tank could get into the city's water supply, and thereby potentially contaminating the city's water supply.
Okay, but there's a line, the meter's out when it's hooked up, and it is city water.
So your meter is pulled out?
Yeah, there's no
You're
meter
using-
there, but you'd have to jump through the pipe and
Maybe, and I don't think we have any water people here, but the way it's been explained to me is you have your whatever jury rig system here, and somehow or another, if there's a crack in a pipe or something, that's why you have to have a backflow device.
it's city water for one thing. It's-
I know, but you're.
You know, and the most of this was just my stubbornness on my part. And then when I got up to $10,000, there's no way I'm gonna pay $10,000. That's ridiculous. $10,000 for on a bill that he told me that he didn't want to hear that I had water. And he told me there's no way I could pump water into my house unless I buy it from the city. That's extortion. And that's the part that upset me. You know, it reminds me of, you guys talk about all this taxes and stuff. I'm talking about my freedom. And it's like you guys are across the pond here where I'm dealing with Great Britain right now. I'm talking about my freedom. I'm a patriot, and I'm going to stand up for my rights. There's not too many of us left that will. And it's, you know, I'm not breaking laws. I've never been in trouble in my life. You know, maybe a code or something. I'm not trying to get away with anything. I like to pay the bill. But $10,000? That's ridiculous. Over something that I told him I had in the first place. I have water. He didn't want to hear it. He's got it out for me for some reason.
Well, let
Yeah,
me
I'm
ask.
sorry, let's do it in order here. Jerry, go ahead.
Well, I'd like to ask you a question. In reading our agenda summary, did you, after they shut you off, reconnect and then force the city to have to pull the meter because you kept illegally reconnecting?
There was somebody staying there at the time, and they said they would have the water bill taken care of for me. And I thought they was going to pay for it. I didn't know they was going to do it illegally.
So you, at one point, found out that it was being done illegally, and how did you rectify that
Oh,
situation?
no, I thought they had it turned back on. I thought he had it turned back on. He said, I'll take care of your water bill. I thought he had it turned back on.
Well,
The
because
thing is-
I'll tell you, my question is because, I'll tell you, it's one thing to say I'm a patriot, it's another thing to steal.
Well, no, I wouldn't steal it. I'm not stealing it.
Well, if you reconnect after you've been disconnected for not paying,
I didn't
you're stealing.
reconnect. I didn't reconnect.
Somebody did.
Well, even if somebody did, it's metered.
All right, let me jump in for a second.
I don't know. That's what I said.
All right,
Somebody.
I want to go back through the report here, and Jerry sort of started the thing here. Your water supply was cut off on August 15th, 2017, correct?
Yes,
For non-payment of your water bill.
yes.
So that's the start of the thing. You were using water, and how much, well, it's irrelevant what the water bill was, but it was not, you weren't paying for the water you were using. So the water was cut off. That's in the code.
Yes.
Okay, so you don't have a problem with that aspect of it.
No, I don't.
Okay, so then, with the water still turned off, I believe that's when you started doing your other stuff with the tanks and stuff.
We cut 2 locks off first.
Yeah, you cut locks off as well, right?
I didn't cut any locks. And the reason I did, he told me that I cannot, I have to buy water from the city.
No, why didn't you pay for the water that you had bought from the city previously? The back charge, the reason that the water was disconnected in the first place. Why didn't you pay that bill?
Because he told me I had to get water from the city.
Of
I
course.
can't get it from nobody else.
We're not, but that's going forward.
Yeah.
Going backward, you had used water from the city that you refused to pay for. And my question to you...
Oh, I was going to pay for it, but the fines kept going up and up and up, and I couldn't afford it.
Well, I'm pretty certain that if you had talked to him and said, look, I
did
can
talk to
afford to
him.
pay,
Me and my sister
and let's have a
both, yeah.
payment schedule going on here, that the fines would not have gone up. If you had made a good faith effort to catch up, but from what I'm reading here, you didn't.
Well, the thing is Brook Trails, if you live at Brook Trails, you can't even collect water off your roof. And is that gonna happen all over? Are we gonna take water rights away from people that they can't do this with water, they can't take it across the
No,
street?
we're not talking water rights.
I'll pay the bill. I'll pay
We're
the
not
bill.
talking water rights.
I
We're
know.
talking that you're hooked up to a city water supply that guarantees fresh, clear, healthy water
Right.
to the residents of this community. And it costs the city a lot of money every year
And
to
I-
do
yeah,
this.
Right, and
And
I
everybody
appreciate it, and I
who-
was gonna pay the bill.
Well, you were going to pay the bill, but you didn't. And instead of paying the bill, instead of sitting down and discussing with the city what your options would be, payment options or whatever, maybe he would forgive.
I tried to discuss it with him.
Well,
Well, and Ron, can I ask a clarifying question regarding?
Yeah.
Did you, let's take John Sherman out. Did you make an appointment with the city manager? Did you make any effort to at least pay that? Or have you made an effort to come into the city, not to talk to John Sherman?
No, I didn't. And the reason I didn't, because the fines were so high, I didn't see how I was gonna pay, how am I gonna pay $10,000 on a water bill?
Okay, I'm talking about your original water bill. Did you ever make any attempt to come into the city and pay your original water bill?
Yeah, I did.
Who did you talk to? Did you make, because we have no record that you came in to pay your original water bill. In fact, all we do know is that somebody cut the locks off. Maybe you say you didn't do it,
We
but I'm
couldn't,
gonna tell you.
I couldn't make payments, and then they came in and took it, they used that to take a child out of the home. And
We didn't take a child
Okay,
out.
I know, but John Sherman was involved in that, getting CPS in there. And also, there was a grace period. They took the meter out before, I couldn't even get down there to pay it that day, because they took the meter out, and you guys, they were closed on Fridays. They took the meter out before the due date, on the grace period. It was taken out ahead of time. And I got records of it. It was taken out before it was ended in, maybe I'm just too stubborn, I don't know. I'll pay the water bill, but I can't pay $10,000. I mean, not even close to it.
then how about making up, sitting down with whoever, whether it's John or somebody.
Would that be somebody besides John?
In the city administration to make up a payment plan. And
Well-
it's very possible they might even forgive some of the fines.
Well, I could pay the original water bill by Friday.
We have costs associated.
Yeah.
Well, the city
I'm not talking
offices
about
are
how
closed on
much, but,
Friday.
just to work it out. But I mean, the way to work out things is to work out things. Sit down and talk like,
I agree with that. I messed up there.
face to face and just,
You're right, I messed up
stop,
there.
we stop playing games.
I messed up there, but
Okay,
I was not.
it may not be too late, because right now, we're at the point of putting a lien on your house, which isn't gonna work, it's not gonna end well.
No, I'll pay the regular water bill by Friday. I mean, the original water bill.
First of all, we are closed Friday, so we have to do it before Friday.
Right, okay,
And
yeah,
then
you're
the
right,
second,
that's right.
the other thing is, we're talking about an original bill that goes back, 6-8 months. And then there is a consequence to not paying the bill in a timely way, and that those consequences have been playing out with some fines and some, consequences like closing the meter down and then having
yeah.
that meter that was closed being illegally unlocked. And, it seems like this has become like a little mini war instead of a let's take care of business. And so many months have gone by, I don't think it's fair to us to have you just pay.
You're
the
right, it
original
has
bill that
become
was
many more,
done.
but I'm not the only one responsible. John Sherman is also. I mean, the way he put it to me is I cannot, I don't want to do this. I just want to get it over with. I really
Okay,
like
well,
this.
I'm hearing a couple comments, and then maybe we need to have some guidance from our staff.
One of the things I just wanted to, the water bill is certainly one part of this, but the other part of it is the $500 per day administrative fine because of living in a house, if I'm not mistaken, that was condemned.
See, there's where he's wrong, though. It can't be condemned.
It was red tagged, or it was tagged to that effect, and unfortunately, that's a pretty serious thing, and you know, it can't be taken lightly, and that's where the 500.
You're right, and I think I just get public opinion and we'll take it on YouTube and see how far it goes. I mean, that's all I can do.
So,
I think.
we do have a time limit on this
Madam Mayor,
exchange, and I would like to hear
all I
about-
wanted to say was that that's where the majority of the fine, I think, came from, was that it just kept escalating at a point of $500 a day. So the amount of the water bill isn't anywhere close to that, I'm sure, even though it's very late.
Yeah. Yes,
Question to Jim.
Jerry.
Jim, so I know that we have our water bill. We ended up hiring a hearing officer for this, and I mean, we're out some cost for this process because, as you put it, you were stubborn, but had you just paid your water bill and kept somebody cut those locks, and I gotta be honest with you, it's your property, I gotta look at you like you're the captain of the ship.
That's fine.
You were responsible.
That's fine.
Okay, if there was a meth lab there, I guarantee you the fire department would send you a bill, and because you're the owner of the property. So at some point, you have that ownership. So I guess my question to you is, if we were inclined to forgive some of this, is there any danger that we lose our place for any of this? Or is there a way to do a time limit? I'm just.
You have discretion, if you wish, to reduce the fines, and obviously, the fines are a soft number. They don't reflect out-of-pocket dollars to the city. But I think the city should have a pretty strict policy about collecting and recovering its costs.
That's kind of my point.
And so what I would suggest you do, this gentleman says that he has every intention of paying for the outstanding water bill. I think he should also pay the outstanding cost. We had to hire a hearing officer. So the amount of the costs, there's already been a hearing in front of a hired attorney who served as a hearing officer at an expense to the city, and 90 days elapsed with no appeal to the Superior Court. So it's already a final, non-appealable decision that this amount of money is owed. Nonetheless, you can, if you wish, reduce some of the fines if you think that's appropriate. And what I would suggest you do is accept staff's recommendation to impose an assessment lien in the amount of any unpaid water and accumulated costs. And with respect to the fines, if you think it's appropriate, you may reduce those to some number if you wish, and then hold both matters in abeyance for a period of 2 weeks or some reasonable period of time for him to honor his word and pay those outstanding costs. And if he does pay the cost, he does pay the bill, he's able to get his house hooked up to sanitary water, that's what you want. That's in the best interest, is that his house get hooked up to water. And so if he pays those costs, pays for the water, and satisfies the city requirements to get his house hooked up to city potable water, and he does so within a pretty short period of time, that you would then agree to waive some portion of the fees.
Could that also include a time payment
Madge?
on part of it?
If you wish, sure.
Yes, Larry?
The way I read it is that you paid the first fine, you paid the first water bill that was accumulated, correct? Is that correct, John?
Yes, yeah.
And then, once that was even, then you started the whole process again.
I have people live in the house.
Is that right? Is that right? Is that what happened?
They were supposed to help pay in the house. I told them I wasn't gonna pay this one, I couldn't, and I didn't have the
Well,
money.
if he's the owner of the house, he's responsible for the water bill.
You're responsible
I
for it.
realize
that's what
that, I
I'm trying to
realize
say.
that, and, but, you know, I didn't have the money at the time, and I was hoping they would help me out with it, and they just let it go, and so I was, you know, I messed up there. I could absorb some of the costs back, maybe we can raise the food bank's rent or something, I don't know how it can be done there, you know.
I would suggest that.
I just, you know, it's a pain.
All right, let him.
One person at a time, please.
I would suggest that, who in the city would be the person that would adjudicate this thing?
Well, there's been an adjudication.
Well, well,
Who
I'm
would
using
negotiate?
I'm using adjudication very loosely.
I would say that this body right here, the city council, can determine what terms you would agree to resolve this.
Well, what I'm interested in is having a one-on-one conversation between him and someone in the city to come up with some kind of a proposed payment plan. And then let's see what we're talking about.
I guess, go ahead.
Yes, Sabrina.
My concern with that, Ron, is that this has been going on since May 2017, and this gentleman here has only appeared once late at the last meeting, and then this evening. So I don't feel like he's shown enough good faith effort that postponing this and having somebody else work with him one-on-one is going to be fruitful. I would be more inclined to keep the $2,700 fine, and then the $10,500. If you refer that to an outside agency, they're going to collect 50% just for collections. So if we can work out an agreement where this gentleman, property owner, could pay the $2,700 and then had a payment plan or even a lien against the property for the $5,250, we could look at some kind of a reduction there. But when you got your water bill, it grew, and each month you knew that it grew, and then you got it caught up again, and then you let it go month by month. And each month when you got your bill, you had to have looked at it and went, oh, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I know that can seem overwhelming, but at the same time, you
Now, how
got
come I
to
get
pay
the
your
fines
bill.
and stuff, some of those fines where they said my house wasn't, it wasn't sanitary, it was sanitary.
Why
Because it was city water
Okay.
brought
What
across the
about-
street in a plastic tank. I mean, I don't have any tests and stuff, but I bet you that water is just as clean as would have left that tap as it would have got in the tank.
So could I go back just one? Before August 15th, your bill had gotten up to $750, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so as your bill was growing each month and you saw it growing, is there some reason why you didn't reach out to the city to work out a payment plan? Because looking at your household, that had to have been anywhere from a 7 to 9 month period of time. That's a long period of time.
I have people living there I didn't even want living there, and I just wanted to get them out of my house, it's been very stressful on me.
But I also.
Very stressful, and I just want, it's a pain for me to take water across the street. Oh, that's a pain. I don't want to do this, but I couldn't afford it.
So, just so you know, that under the codes, which we're supposed to be enforcing, even though you're taking city water from a neighboring property, you're taking it in a hose and you're putting it in a tank.
Okay,
and
I
then
see
it's
there's
going
no,
in.
I see.
And there is definitely a real possibility, and that's why the codes are written the way they are, that water by that time it has been contaminated, perhaps.
I see there's no, because it's you against me. Another thing is, they told me there is no possible way that this could be done. I cannot take water out of a Safeway and buy it and pour it into, it can't be done. John Sherman told me that, and the city attorney says, no, you cannot do that. You have to leave your home now. I said, why would I have to leave my home? For my safety. I said, where am I gonna go?
Wait,
How come I don't leave from, how's that safe?
you were talking about going across the street and getting water. Where is across the street?
Yeah, my mother's property. And that's another thing. I did not take water from any neighbor. I have permission to get it from my mother.
Okay, and Jerry?
You know what, I'm prepared to put a motion forward, kind of follow on what Sabrina says a little bit, but at the same time, I'll be honest with you. Somebody cut those locks, you're responsible. I think that you probably knew about it, but I'm willing to kind of split the difference here, that we have some hard costs. We have the cost of our water, we have the cost of hiring some professionals to get
I don't
involved.
mind paying the hard cost.
I'm sorry, he's speaking.
I'm sorry.
We have hard costs as far as we had to hire our hearing officer for this because you weren't playing nice. And don't interrupt me. And so I would be inclined to forgive a part, I guess my motion would be that I would say follow staff's recommendations with the exception of giving a 2-week window where you not only have to pay our hard costs, I would have the 10,000 and part of the deal, and I would want you reconnected to city water within 2 weeks, if you want that deal.
Terry, could you be, I didn't understand your motion.
So I guess I want him to reconnect within 2 weeks to city water.
So he
has to-
can't unless he pays the $2,700?
Yeah.
So first step, you'd have to pay the $2,700, get reconnected to city water within 2 weeks,
What's the cost to reconnect?
pay the
All
past
those-
due.
No, there is
Past due
a
and plus
cost.
our costs.
There is a cost. Do you, Kathy, do you know what that,
The reconnection cost is $40.
it's $40.
Was that all?
$27.40.
The only other thing that I,
Wait a minute, there's more than that.
And then,
There's an existing bill, I believe.
that's what I was gonna bring up, is that it's the the hard costs are the $2,700 plus the $1,200 in the water bill. So that's what the hard cost
Yeah,
is.
I would say that and the connection fee or the $40 fee. We'd have the 10,000 in half, but again, you have to pay our hard costs, connect up to our water.
How much am I looking at here?
look, can we just, when you say have
The 10,000.
the 10,000, but then when does that have to get paid by?
I would think that, since we've had no good faith on your part, that I think that that would be something that I would be willing to take payments on, but I would want the lien in place so that in case he doesn't.
I'm doing the house, I don't care. I don't care no more. I really don't care.
So we would keep it,
Clean
and
the
then we
house,
can.
whatever you gotta do, and whatever you gotta do, and
And
I'll
that
just
way-
do what I gotta do, right there.
What was the $1,200 that you were
Clean
talking
the house.
about?
You know what, I proved the point, though. It is extortion, no matter how you look at it, it's extortion. I proved the point. Clean the house, I don't give a shit.
That went well.
I'd just like to clarify a couple of things that Mr. Walker said. Number one, he's objecting to the fines as part of the reason why he couldn't reconnect or anything. The fines didn't occur. The fines began to accrue 7 days after the October 24th compliance order. Now, he's been disconnected since August 15th at this point for non-payment, and he's been shipping water. The other thing is, what he's referring to, I didn't tell him you have to buy water from the city. I said you have to have an approved water source. When I went to him initially and said, listen, you don't have sanitary facilities, I'm gonna condemn your house, they were literally hauling water in 5-gallon buckets. Where it came from, that was not even discussed. It was, oh, I have a 5-gallon bucket of water right here. I said, that's not an appropriate or an approved water source. So I just wanted to make those clarifications. I have nothing against Mr. Walker.
One thing I wanted to add is that you noticed that John's report requested only to lien the cost, and the bulk of it was to go to a collection agency. And that's because in 2016, after we overhauled our code enforcement ordinance, there was a federal appellate court decision that interpreted California's laws and concluded that California cities do not have the right to file liens for the recovery of fines and fees, only for costs. And so our as to the $10,000 soft fees here, our options are to sue them in small claims court, where John or some other staff could do so without attorney cost, have your city attorney do it at an expense to you, or send it out to a collection agency, and they basically will strive to collect every dollar, but will charge 50 cents on the dollar for their fee.
Okay.
So I was hoping that we could reach a resolution with him in the room here, where he would agree to come in and pay these hard costs in exchange for a reduction of the fees, but of course he stormed off. So I think in light of that, you ought to accept staff's recommendation. And
Yeah, I was looking to maybe, hold that at, you know, I didn't realize that that's where he was.
And if you go ahead and accept staff's recommendation and John pursues to file the lien for the cost and send this to once you send it to a collection agency, they're gonna wanna be able to collect it. But perhaps you hold off on doing that for a couple of weeks to give him the opportunity to pay his bill and to seek reconnection to his house.
At your disposal.
Do we know if he would be good? I'm not sure I got an answer. There was a $1,200 on top of the $2,700 someone mentioned?
It's a water bill.
And what's the $1,200 for?
So I
The
really-
water bill itself,
But what's the $2,700?
the costs of the hearing and the code enforcement.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So, but that's not part of your agenda summary we weren't requesting as a part of this agenda item, the recovery of the $1,200.
No.
Okay, so you can't take an action on that.
Okay, so we're looking at $2,700 upfront in
Right.
cash money, and then the other. So, do you have a sense of how able he is to pay the $2,700? Because to take an action that's going to require the payment, and it can't be done, you know, what's the point?
All I can say is there's property on both sides of the street. There's a commercial complex there. There is a approximately 3-acre yard full of logging equipment and trucks.
His
He's in the
properties?
logging business.
These are his properties?
His mother owns,
Okay,
his
okay,
mother owns
so the money is there.
property across the
Okay,
street.
all right.
He works in the logging industry.
So it's not unreasonable to expect that this $2,700 could be paid?
There's what I would consider a fairly expensive pickup truck sitting in the driveway and a sports car sitting in the carport.
Can I,
Okay.
Yes.
do you want to change, do you want to craft your motion or?
Well, you can help me, because I think you're maybe going
Okay.
the same way. You know, I want to make sure that we collect our hard costs,
Yeah.
and then maybe direct staff to hold in abeyance the collection of the lien, or not the lien, but
Fines.
the fines, as long as we can collect our hard costs, and then an abeyance would be putting the lien on those hard costs if we're able to come to some resolution, and maybe direct a letter to him.
Could I also suggest, if we go ahead with that, and the payment of those hard costs be on a, maybe 1 month rather than 2 weeks, or at least until after
Yeah.
the first of the next month, so that if he, you know, it gives him a little bit more chance to,
But I would want him connecting up to our system.
at that time.
The only point about that in crafting the letter to him, that's $2,700 is the hard cost. In order to reconnect, he would, in my mind, have to pay the back water bill
Yes,
plus the reconnection fee.
Yeah.
Yes,
Larry had a question.
yes, Larry.
My thing that I tried to get to him is he paid it off at one time and then went back, and I have no lenience for him at all. I mean, we all pay the water bill, and if we let it go, then we pay a fine plus the water bill and the next month's water bill. And you
only
guys
other-
cut him some slack, and he'll be right back here again.
The only other somewhat attenuating factor is that he has renters who are probably pain in the neck and aren't paying or whatever. But that's still his responsibility, and it is the landlord's responsibility to provide water to a habitable home for the renter, not the renter's responsibility. I mean, and he might have to deal with the renter, but, you know, it's still his responsibility. Do you have a wording that you'd like to
I do.
propose?
I'd like to suggest that this plan, and if he fails at any part of this plan, that we would go with the recommendation, the recommended action, but that would be that we would give this property owner 5 days to pay $2,700 plus a reconnect fee of $40. If he takes care of this, he's now reconnected, and then we give him 30 days from the 5 days, so that would be 35 days later, to pay 10% of the $10,500 to show good faith. And he would need to pay that, if he pays that on time, for 5 consecutive months, then the balance of the $5,250 would be forgiven. If he's more than 10 days late on any given month, I'm just trying to give him a way out, then
You would send it to collection?
we would send a collection and it would revert back to the recommended action. This gives him an opportunity to try and rectify the situation.
The only
And
thing-
also a future discount if he follows through.
Does this include, that's 27 plus the 1,200?
I think he has to pay past due in order to get reconnected, so that should be, and we don't have to give a dollar amount, but he has to pay the 2,700 of hard costs and be paid up in order to pay the reconnect fee, I think. Is that?
So John, he would need more than the $2,700 in 5 days. How much would he
Just looking
need?
at 39.
Well, 2,700 is costs.
Okay.
1,200 is the water bill itself.
Okay.
$40 is the reconnection.
So if we did
$40 is
27
the
plus
reconnection.
1,200, that would be 3,900, correct?
Plus the 40.
Plus the 40.
Mhm.
Okay, so 3,900, which would leave the balance of the monthly installments, 10,500 minus 1,200,
Yeah, I'm lost.
which would be 9,300.
No, the 10,500, if I could, Madam Mayor, remains the fines. The 1,200 is actually,
So
it's,
it would stay the 10,500?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Penny, you have that written down?
Yeah.
I do.
And it would be 5 working days.
5 working days to show good faith on the 2,700 plus the 1,200. So he would need to pay a total of $3,900 within 5 days, which he stated that he could get things taken care of. And plus the $40 reconnect fee.
Right.
Could I add the one thing that in the event he doesn't follow through, that we go through with the...
That's what she said.
That's what I said, yeah, if that sounds acceptable.
That way staff has direction in case he doesn't follow through.
If he fails to follow through, then we revert to the recommended action.
In the meantime, he doesn't, until he reconnects, he doesn't have a legally habitable structure, but we're gonna give him 5 working days and see if we can get that resolved. Is that? Okay.
Could I suggest
Yes,
maybe a little
escalating
twist on what you suggested, and that is, if you accept staff's recommendation, which is really clear, you're gonna file a lien on the hard costs, you're gonna send to collection the $10,000. So now we have an order from the council accepting that remedy. However, you're going to hold that in abeyance for a period of X days or weeks to reach a satisfactory payment arrangements with him that includes the following. And then are your points. He's got to pay $2,700 quickly, he's got to pay 10% of this, and if he does all of these things, then he's going to end up with a reduction, right? He's going to end up with half off of the 10,000 in fines.
Correct.
But start off with an order that accepts staff's recommendation, then you have that hammer over it, which you are going to hold in abeyance for a period of 20 days or whatever to allow him to reach an acceptable payment terms that include the following, and then outline your terms.
Yeah, so it's at a minimum. So he could pay that off faster if he could.
I mean, the city's gonna lose out on the $5,250 as soon as we send it to collection. At least this gives him an opportunity to receive the benefit of that reduction if he makes an honest
And it gets
attempt
him
to
into,
settle.
and it gets him into compliance.
And it gets his water turned back on,
Which is really our goal.
important. That's the key.
The goal here is let's
that-
get this house hooked back up to
Exactly.
the water system so that it's safe and sound.
And this
as
gives
a-
him that opportunity.
As Ron pointed out, there is there is a legal way not to be on the city's water, but he obviously has failed to do that.
Yeah,
So-
5-gallon buckets in a plastic tank and
Or
a
hoses from
non-potable
the
water truck, those are not solutions.
Okay, so that's a motion,
Yeah.
and I think it's clear, and we can make sure that it gets written out and clear. Does anybody want to second that motion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. I don't think I actually ever asked if there was anyone else in the public who wanted to speak to this. But yes, if you'd like to.
Okay, could we read the motion so we know what we're voting for?
That's what I'd like
I can
to know.
restate it after.
Thank you.
What I'd like to really do is, my name is Barbara Plaza. I'm gonna have my water meter taken out of my, I have been deeded a water meter on my property. And this Friday, it's gonna be taken off because John Sherman put on a
Is this for
smart
Jen-
meter,
for this gentleman?
a water smart meter, and it drew up over 12,716 gallons of water in 1 month. That
make
needs
it-
to be addressed.
Barbara, can you make it relevant to this particular?
Well, it is a water issue.
So-
And I'm going to have my water meter that was deeded to my property in my deed taken away from me this Friday because I have been getting a bill of a lot of water that I have no hookup to. I have a lock on my water meter that John Sherman put on in 2016.
Madam Mayor, this is outside of the agendized item.
Yeah, well, it needs to be approached.
Yeah.
I need to have it not happen this Friday.
It isn't, yeah, it isn't something
Okay,
that.
then did you get your message
I
from
did,
Priscilla?
and yeah. and
Okay,
I
then I'd
was-
like to
I was
solve
gonna-
this.
But, yeah, but it isn't on the city council's agenda, so it
Okay.
isn't something we can do right now.
But I'd like to have you talk with me before that Friday, please. Because this has gone way out of hand.
Yeah.
Way out of hand. A smart meter should not even be put on a property meter, water meter, if it's not gonna be properly monitored.
Would you like me to restate the
Yes.
motion? Okay. Would you like to restate it for me just so that we're clear, or do you want me to
Maybe
read
we
what I
could-
have?
Well, I was just gonna say that the motion would be to accept staff's recommendation of filing an assessment lien for the city's out-of-pocket costs in the sum of $2,700, and to refer the payment of the fines in the amount of $10,500 to a collection agency, but to hold these collection items in abeyance for a period of,
Well,
6 months plus 5 days, provided that he meets, or 6 months, 15 days maximum, provided he meets all the
you're gonna
deadlines.
give him 6 months to?
No.
To pay every dollar, to pay.
don't we want him to reach a written resolution payment plan with the city like in pretty
Yes.
short order, like 20 days or something?
Yes.
Okay, so I would suggest that the motion be to accept staff's recommendation with regard to filing an assessment lien for the $2,700 and referring the $10,500 fees to a collection agency, but to hold these collection matters in abeyance for a period of 10 or 20 days, whichever you think is right, to allow him to come to terms with the city for a repayment plan that consists of the following, and then
So
have
mine
you
was
identify.
my original motion was 5 days, because he's sitting without water, and we don't want the house sitting that way. So we want to urge him to resolve the matter so that
Okay.
he's got water established. So I see where you were going with
So
that.
you're saying that then, to try to combine these two things, you want that written agreement to these conditions during those, at the end of 5, can I say working days? That he not only pays that initial amount, but he agrees to
Signs
these
the
terms.
written agreement.
Which then extend beyond that, but we're holding it in abeyance for 5 working days?
Right, we're not gonna pursue staff's recommendation of filing a lien and sending to a collection agency for a period of 5 working days to allow him to come and sign a payment plan. And the payment plan now then will identify the terms that you,
And the payment plan would be that he would need to pay the $3,900 by the 5th business day, plus he would need to pay the $40 reconnect fee. And then the terms going forward would be that every month he needs to pay 10% of the remaining balance of $10,500. Once he's paid off on time, 50% of the balance, provided it's all paid on time, then we'll forgive the remaining 50%. But all payments have to be made on time. If they're more than 10 days late, then that forgiveness.
Or he disconnects from our system.
Or he disconnects from our system, then that $5,250, what shall we call it, discount, or waiving of the fees he'll forego it.
Null and void.
Yeah, it'll be null and void.
You had a question from Larry?
Yeah.
Okay, there's.
So what happens when he does not live up to his part of the bargain?
Then we go back to staff recommendations.
But is he gonna come in here again and go through it again?
No, we've already,
He's already done it once.
right, but we're passing that today, that if he doesn't do it, then we've moved forward. It doesn't have to come back.
It doesn't
before
have
the
to come
council
back
again.
to us at that point. It would be at a collection agency. So that's the motion.
So what was the time frame for the $2,700?
5 days, 5 business days.
5 business days, and then within that 5 business days, he would apply to be reconnected.
It's actually 3,900, 2,700 plus the
Well,
$1,200.
the 1,200, I was thinking would be part of getting reconnected,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
that's a fine point. So you're saying all of that would occur within 5 days, and then we have this, 20 days in which to come up with a payment plan for the $10,000?
He has to sign a payment agreement within that 5th business day at the very beginning.
Okay.
But then his next payment on that $10,500 is due 30 days later.
Okay.
The only thing I think would be good to clarify that it's the 2,700 plus just generically plus coming up to current payment on water bills, so that he can then, in that same period of time, get reconnected.
Which was the 3,900 plus 40.
Yeah, but instead of saying 39, say 27 plus paying the water bill.
1,200.
My memory is not accurate enough to use the number. I would just say pay past due.
Past due.
water bill and
2,700
reconnection.
plus past due,
Yeah.
plus the $40
Exactly.
reconnecting. I'll amend that motion to include that.
Okay, that's your
We had a
motion.
second, is that still?
Was it seconded?
I had seconded it.
Okay,
I'll
and-
agree with that.
Okay, good. We have a motion. I think we all understand it, and it's written down, and we'll just check to make sure it says what we want to say. And there was no more public comment on this, I assume, so we have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Gonzalez,
Yes.
Stransky,
No.
Ornstein,
Yeah.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Rashbaum.
Yes. It's 9:30. I know that there are a whole series, we didn't also hear from Public Works yet, but I'm assuming there's no report from Public Works. I don't know, I know I have some items to report, and I think others of us do from our committees. You want to take a 5-minute break and come right back? Okay, 5-minute break. Please try to make it only 5 minutes.
So we can
We are back in session.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going on to City Council and Committee reports. League of Cities. Would you like to report, Jerry?
Sure. Just before you got there, Madge, apparently Stephanie came down for the legislative part of it, and some of what we discussed were the resolutions we discussed today. They also discussed opposition to SB 827, the Wiener, that's his name, planning zoning exempt housing near transit stops. And they said that it may have only applied to like maybe San Rafael in this area up here, but that it set a bad precedent if that passed, because we would lose, and depending on what happened in the future, we would lose all our ability to have any say in any sort of housing from a planning standpoint, that as well as it was built through some sort of transit hub or transit stop. So we voted in the legislative committee to send a letter of opposition from our area up here. The other one was we voted to support McGuire's SB 833, which creates uniform standards and alert systems. That's been a hot topic ever since the fires, so I expect more to come, especially if that goes forward. And then And I think that was basically from the legislative part of it. And then you were there for when, I guess we were slated to have McGuire and Wood there, but McGuire came in and gave kind of an update. One of the things that, we had a doctor in the audience earlier, and there was a question posed to him regarding single-payer health care, and he had indicated that he wasn't responsible at this point for blocking any of that, even though there were some rumors circulating that he had some, saying that it was more that it hadn't made it to his committee, so he couldn't act on that. And we were there for that part, weren't you, Bob?
Yes.
But he is co-chair of a special appointed, I guess, sort of an ad hoc. So it is sort of, it's not his health committee, but it's,
Yeah,
he's
so-
co-chair of another committee that is dealing
So
with
it's
that.
still out there, but it's not buried per se, it's just it may come back. But apparently there was no funding mechanism for the process, so even though it passed one of the houses, it wasn't, there was no funding mechanism that was, so it's kind of like saying you're gonna build the Taj Mahal, but not giving you any money to build it, so it kind of sits there, so. And
I am pursuing, getting some questions answered about that through proponents, and then I intend to, kind of keep a track of that, the status of that bill, because the proponents are saying you want to have the mechanism so that when the federal government is more cooperative, which we hope that will happen, that you will be able to move forward. If you haven't got the policy in place, then you're starting from scratch. So I'm hearing a little different information about the status of that.
And then I think the next meeting, I believe, is May 5th in Lake County, and they haven't decided where, whether it's going to be Clear Lake or Lakeport. So I'll let you guys know, and that's it.
Okay. I have a question of you, Bob. When the REMA situation, we're going to having a, should we report that under league or separately?
That should be separately.
Okay, all right. So MCOG.
MCOG did not meet.
Okay. BDFC is not meeting this month either, but will meet in April. Solid Waste, they met on the 8th. No, they will meet again on the 8th of, I'm sorry. Get this straight. They met on March 8th. I'm kind of having trouble keeping my months straight. And they're going to be meeting monthly. And the meeting on March 8th was very interesting. Among other things, we are going ahead with a 3-year plan that the new executive director of MSWA has put together. He's also renaming it sort of a nickname. The official name is still Mendocino Solid Waste Management Authority, but the nickname is Mendo Recycle. So it's similar to Cal Recycle. Mendo Recycle, that's going to be the website. It's much easier to wrap your head around that and, and get that out of your mouth. So it's, and in the 3-year plan, so this is going to be the new logo, Mendo Recycle.
They're still gonna collect trash?
They oversee the trash, and yes, they do. They still do
Okay,
trash.
well, that's good to know.
In that 3-year plan, there are 12 different areas of responsibility. The ones that became the most, had the most substance to talk about, one of them is pharmaceuticals and sharps. And we heard from Jerry Ward that at his facility, when the recycle trucks come in and dump their recycling load, and they have to go through that to separate the different kinds of recyclables, he gets on average 100 sharps a day in that truck. So that's pretty shocking, and his staff have to wear extra thick gloves, and it's still not always 100% sure that they won't get stabbed by these sharps. So we wanted to have a much more aggressive program for education, and also places where people can get, drop off their pharmaceuticals and their sharps, so that they don't go into the waste stream, because it's really dangerous and not good. I just heard that the hospital is now going to have a pharmaceuticals collection, and I think the police department already has a pharmaceutical Ann Sharp's collection?
Not in charge.
No Sharps. Okay, so they're going to be trying to do a lot more getting places to collect them and a lot of education. And one of the problems is veterinary medicine. A lot of people inject their pets, you know, get stuff from the veterinarian and then inject their pets and then they don't know what to do with it. So anyway, that was a big hot item.
It's not at the hospital, by the way, it's at the pharmacy, at the annex.
Yes, you're right. But that is going to be another place for pharmaceuticals to be dropped off. And that's a big, important thing because we don't want people putting their used pharmaceutical products in the water system. Very bad. The other one that was quite controversial and important for all of the waste haulers, and that is the recyclables. The market for recyclables has just, you know, crashed. China used to buy them, and so you used to actually be able to get money back when you took your loads of recyclables. Now they don't only take them, but the haulers are having to pay to have their, you know, stacks of newspapers and their plastics and their, even the aluminum, I think, is getting to be a problem. So they are very likely going to be talking with MSHWA about renegotiating contracts, and it'll probably come back to us eventually because they're having to pay to store their recyclables. They don't even, those are the main ones. And then there are some discrepancies in the amount of the CPI that's used for adjusting the rates for the haulers, and that maybe needs to be standardized across the whole county. Some of these problems, especially the recycling, is a statewide problem. So a lot of this, our new general manager for MSWA is very well connected and is going to try to pursue that. And they're going to have a very active public outreach and education program. And they're also, another thing they're going to be doing is more active enforcement of illegal dumps. And this is their map of the whole county, and they're going to have their new staff person who's in charge of enforcing illegal dumps spend at least one day a week in each of these 4 zones.
Now, this is just people that are just dumping their stuff out in the dirt?
Yeah, a lot of, yeah. And so they do want, on their website, they want to establish a way that people can easily go on the website and say, I saw somebody dumping, or I saw a big pile of trash wherever, and locate it, and then that enforcement person can go out and spend a day a week in each of these zones, going and cleaning them up, and then if necessary, trying to find out who's doing it and enforce them. So anyway, they're really taking a very active approach on enforcement, on trying to do more public education. Oh, another thing that they're also doing is the disposable little propane things that people use for camping. And because we have lots of campgrounds in our county, we are responsible for lots and lots of currently non-recyclable propane, small propane tanks. So they're going to try to convert over a period of months, get the sports outlets to sell the recyclable, refillable ones, make people pay extra for the non-recyclables, and really convert over to a completely recyclable program, refillable tanks. So that was all very, very interesting. I think the next meeting, we're going to be meeting monthly for a while these new initiatives are going on. That is MSWA. Now back to my PowerPoint. Where's my agenda? Who's next? Here it is. MTA.
MTA, so MTA would like to be able to come to the next Caltrans meeting. I think it's important that they have a seat at the table, because when we start tearing up the sidewalks and stuff, it's going to impact how people can get on the bus. So I'd like to get your blessing that they would be welcome at the table at the next Caltrans meeting, and give them an invitation. Any reason why that would be an issue?
Madam Mayor, as long as, you know, their staff, I think that's fine.
Okay.
You know.
It would be the director for the MTA.
And we would just coordinate with Kathy, the coordinator, coordinator manager. And I understand where she needs to be involved, or they need to be involved in terms of the location of the.
Just want to make it smoother for the people who are riding the bus to be able to access the bus, get off the bus, those sorts of things. The other thing is that the tourism board has been thinking about ideas on signature events, and I was thinking, you know, Ukiah's got the trolley that they use, so I approached MTA and I said, well, could Willits get the trolley for the 4th of July event? And it kind of got this like, And so we're having some discussions and about the possibility of maybe having the trolley in Willits, maybe that June 22nd, which is the day that they kick off the downtown merchants festivities, maybe the hometown celebration through the 4th of July. We'll have to work out cost and hours. Maybe we get sponsors for the trolley.
It's my understanding that Ukiah, for when they have it down there, the local businesses sponsor, and they have placards that say this is sponsored by.
Yes. So I'm working with MTA to see what would the cost be for the hours that we feel that it would best serve our community, because we're not going to need it for the large number of hours that they have there. But just trying to figure out, okay, what is the cost? Do you have a driver available during that period of time? And then from there, taking the next step to figure out how we can pay for it. So I'll keep you updated on that. But that's exciting to be able to offer that to Willits. And I think that's it for MTA.
Okay, I just, one of the PS on MSWA is that I mentioned to Jerry Ward that we haven't really heard a report on how they're doing with our contract. And he said, did you want me to come to a city council meeting? I said, yeah, I think that'd be great. So we have to schedule that too at some point.
And has anybody used Route Match with MTA? Have you checked it out? I know, Larry, you helped fund some of it from MCOG, but I recently have a young man in my household, and we're using it on a regular basis, and I found that it's made riding the bus so much simpler. You just put in the address where you're starting and where you're going, and it tells you, you know, exactly which buses to get on, what time you'll arrive. It's very, very user-friendly, so, yeah, just thought I'd let you know and update.
The thing that was interesting to me is the one at the Santa Rosa Airport. I mean, that somebody's missing a bet if you don't use that, because that's really a good thing, and it goes twice a day.
The smart train?
Oh, the airport,
Oh.
it stops by the.
MTA.
So you can actually go on Route Match and put in a Willits location and then put in the San Francisco airport, and it will tell you step by step how to get there.
Wow.
Yeah, so Route Match is very useful for those who have.
That's nice. That's a good thing.
Just Google MTA, it's gonna come up first in your news feed, and you just type in from and to in the address bar. It's easy.
All public transit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You got the website?
Next on our.
I got that website.
You just have to Google MTA.
You can do it on
and
your
you got
phone,
this.
actually.
I think next on our agenda is LAFCO.
LAFCO met on March 5th in Ukiah, and we had a couple of sphere of influence workshops involving the Covelo Fire, Potter Valley Community Services District, Mendocino Fire Protection District, Redwood Valley Calpella Fire District, and Hopland Fire. And we had workshops. It's kind of the preliminary before it comes back for a public hearing. Obviously, we're still in the mix for our sphere of influence. It's kind of, they mentioned they've talked to Dusty, and there's some homework assignments involved there. So we did a workshop on our preliminary budget for LAFCO, and there was a proposed executive officer contract amendment and renewal of the contract. And there was discussion involved moving the reserve fund that they have from one bank to another because of some fees. And I guess they had them at the what was the Mental Lake Credit Union First Community, but apparently their rules are a little different, and so they're moving to one of the other banks in Ukiah. So,
I have a question. Sonoma County has an urban boundaries plan where each city defines their growth boundary. And it sounds like it might be a more efficient and more binding kind of arrangement than the sphere of influence is, because...
well, the sphere of influence is required by law, so you have to kind of designate your sphere of influence. And this is our chance to basically, like in relation to Willits or the fire districts, and a lot of the fire districts, most of them haven't changed their districts, so it's kind of updating them. And versus, in our case, this is where we might designate that there are potential areas that we may be looking at. And so that's a little different than what you're talking about. But it's a useful thing.
Yeah, I always feel a little frustrated by sphere of influence because it sort of enables you to move towards annexation if that's where you're going, but it doesn't give you any authority in the meantime. And I always feel that's a little, it's like you get your wish list, but you don't have any authority, and meanwhile it's under the county's authority. So I just think if there's any tools in our
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those that we need to be, what I learned initially by getting on LAFCO was I thought I'd have more of a say, but it's more of a process you go through to identify potential areas, not necessarily that you're going to annex them. And there may be a case where it may make sense that we annex them, but we may not want to, and that's where LAFCO maybe comes in and says, look, these areas are underserved. They call them ducks, basically unserved areas or islands. And the idea is in some cases they want you annexing them, but there may not be the political will on either the person wanting to do the annexation or those wanting to be annexed may not want to be. But it may be a thing where you're contiguous to the city, but maybe those folks have failing water systems, and in those cases they want to come in, or sewer systems, et cetera.
Do you have to have water and sewer available for these spots that you're going to use for realm of influence?
I think that's part of what you have to identify, whether or not we have the capacity for those areas, and/or you got to be able to serve those areas.
Right,
It
but
may be one that
you don't have to have the things there. You just that you have the facilities to do it. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
even if it meant expanding your capacity to do it, but it's feasible to envision that you could.
There's some districts, because of the geography, that it makes more sense for this district to serve that district or that unserved area, but because of the geography, it doesn't make sense.
Yes.
And I can't think of what the name of it is, but back east when they do this, and the only place I know is where my daughter lives, is when you have a realm of influence and you're going to do a housing project, let's say, in that area, you have to pay for a bus, pay for elementary, middle school, and high school for the kids that are going to be in this. And these are all paid for by the contractor, not by the city.
By the developer.
And Bob, what's the name of that?
Oh, those development impact fees?
Yes, we really need to look at that when we're going to play
That was one of the things he
game.
mentioned.
Thank you.
Okay. Finance Committee, would you like to report?
Well, Madam Mayor, the Finance Committee did meet. We met on the 8th of March, and essentially staff reviewed the recommendation regarding RGS that the council approved tonight.
I think it was the 1st of March.
It was, I thought, right after the Revive Ed meeting, which, was that first?
Yeah.
No, the Caltrans meeting.
Or the same day as Caltrans.
Yeah. Oh, then it was the first.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was the main thing.
Right.
Okay, water and wastewater?
If I could-
Oh, go ahead. Sure.
If I could make a suggestion just for the discussion for the next finance meeting. This council hasn't set aside any funds. I know we're in deficit spending, but we haven't set aside any funds whatsoever for any kind of business support. I know we don't have any Revive Ed funds, but we really need to do something. For example, West Company reached out to me and possibly others of you, and they've got a wonderful professional that is willing to come and give a workshop to our business owners to help them increase business and just a specialty in retail. And I think it would be very helpful for our community, but because we don't have any funds set aside, that's not even something that a city manager would have the discretion to pay for something like that. So in order to pull something like that off, it's gonna have to come down to business owners sponsoring the event or trying to get a chamber. And I'm not saying that it'll be too late for the city to address that, but we're talking about supporting our community through this transition process, but we haven't allocated any money to help our business community adjust or educate or anything. I don't know, maybe, I know this isn't agendized, but maybe we could make that a topic of discussion, either at a finance meeting and then bring it to the council. Just a thought.
Okay. Water and wastewater
Hasn't met.
hasn't met. Still hasn't met. Revive Ed.
Do you want to run with that? Otherwise, I think we discussed signage in relation. There was a kind of a review of some of the billboard stuff that we talked about, but we talked about signage in relation to what Caltrans. And then, I'm trying to think, what was the
It
other?
was more of a report than really
Yeah.
any work progress was made. I was hoping we would get a little bit more, get something accomplished, not that it was bad to share
There was also an
information.
update on the freeway too.
Which
Yes.
we're going to come to with the
Yes.
Caltrans report. So,
Yeah, Bob was able to give an extensive report on Caltrans, I think, which was really helpful for people there.
And an update, I think, on maybe the projects coming, I think.
And the projects, yeah. But we didn't really get to maybe what the heart of the agenda was, which was to really come up with a vision for signage. So hopefully we'll get there.
Okay, well, the next item is the Caltrans working group or ad hoc committee. And I think you probably can make, that was met on March 1st.
That was on March 1st, and essentially just trying to give you a quick summary. That was the first coordination meeting that we had since November. And what we learned is that Granite Construction was awarded wasn't awarded the bid, but identified as the low bidder for the sidewalk project. And their timing at this point is they're getting very close to award, probably no later than the 1st of March. And
April?
1st of April, and then...
Thank you, Rod.
Yeah, thank you. And then, once it's been awarded, they have about 40 days to actually mobilize. And that means they'll have submittals that they have to make to Caltrans, but they'll also be submitting a schedule as to the sidewalk project and when it'll get started and how it will be executed. They covered that a bit. It will be executed in 16 segments. None of those segments will be adjacent to each other. They'll offset each other. All the work will be done in one segment at a time, so it's not like you're but the work will be done when that segment is done. It's not like you're going to end up with all of the sidewalk ripped up on one side, and they are going to try and be business friendly. They are going to put together with us, with the city manager as a lead contact person, a public information program. They're going to do a workshop. The date for that workshop isn't known. At that time, we talked about May 1st, but it may in fact be earlier than that if the contractor looks like they're going to move ahead at a quicker pace. And that will be open to the community. Beyond that, there will be a program of weekly updates or daily updates, and those will be done in a variety of different ways: social media, Twitter, possibly contacts with the newspaper. The other thing that is probably worth noting is then most of the project that you're going to see get started will be the sidewalk reconstruction and the utilities. The utilities will include irrigation and electrical chases, as well as conduit for broadband, to reserve space for broadband. The striping on the street will resemble the Main Street plan in terms of the bulb outs, the crosswalks, etc. But that'll be just in striping, so you'll get a chance to see how it will work. The next Caltrans meeting is going to be April 3rd. I sent a memo out to you today, and the minutes I also attached for you to review, but it'll be April 3rd here at 2 o'clock.
Question, did the fiber optics cable lines get resolved about?
Yes. Yeah.
So they're going to put them in, and hopefully they'll be potentially usable in the future? Good.
Yes. Excuse me.
I have also one other thing to add, but go ahead, Larry.
When they do the sidewalks and things and start tearing stuff out, there's a lot of utilities. They're right underneath the sidewalk on the old part of town. And they're going to have to do something with those.
Well, they're taking that into account as far as I understand with the plan, because that's why it's a sidewalk and utilities. I don't, they will be attempting to disrupt as little as they possibly can. But they know, they have information, I believe, on where those utilities are.
And also, I understand from being at the Revive Ed the other day, that they're going to work at night?
No, the suggestion, and I forwarded that suggestion to them, there came up, two things that came up in the Revive Ed meeting, if you don't mind, was actually trying to stay out of the downtown area during the final quarter of the year to the degree that you can, because that's the most productive for small businesses. And a question was raised about doing night work, and I've passed both of those questions on to the Caltrans, and haven't got a response yet.
So it's not in concrete?
No.
So to speak. Did you have something?
I was just going to say, Larry, what I heard in that Caltrans meeting is that in selecting which blocks they'll work on, part of which block they're going to choose, say this particular week, has to do with when they're going to be able to work cooperatively with the utilities. So if there's electrical in there, they can't just choose that block unless they've coordinated it with the utilities.
And they're also going to avoid having any of the parade route be affected during
For those 2
Frontier,
weeks.
yeah, the Frontier Days period. The other thing that did come up at the Caltrans meeting was the bidding process on the Sherwood Road intersection. And the bids were actually opened yesterday, I believe it was? 13. And they are 10% over the estimated budget amount. And they had told us at that meeting that if the CTC, the California Transportation Commission, has basically capped their budget, they cannot go over that amount that they had budgeted. So now that it came in 10% over, they're going to be looking at what their options are on the Sherwood Road intersection design.
Madam Mayor, just to kind of amplify that, I think there was a bit of, within what was approved CTC, there was a bit of a contingency. They're looking to see if there is a way to fund it, but
Yes.
They don't know that answer yet.
Yeah, they're going to look at it and see whether, yeah. I also put a letter into, or an email into Kathy, the
Project manager.
project manager, saying that if it turned out that they aren't going to fund and do that project, that we think we should have those funds available for other solutions to the Brook Trails transportation logjam that we have, namely perhaps the second access and certainly emergency access. So if they were to simply say, I'm sorry, we can't do the intersection project, and try to keep that money for Caltrans, I think they owe us that spending.
Well, aren't they eventually gonna have to do it sometime?
Under the relinquishment agreement, there's a little wiggle room, if I remember the wording correctly, that said they committed to do it if it was feasible.
I think you're right.
And that leaves a little out for them, which we will have to watch that closely.
That's gonna be interesting, because
It's very
it goes
interesting.
from the high school to 20. And that is right there.
And then there was two other concerns that I raised. One was that I asked that when they do the Sherwood project, that the 3 days for the start of school, that they, like they did for downtown, that they refrain from that 2 weeks of doing work, that the 3 days, there's plenty of notice for them, but they haven't confirmed. That was the first time they heard it, so hopefully won't have any work going on Sherwood that period of time. And then the other thing was, I'm concerned about the staging areas for their supplies. When they did this north end of town, they used the high school, and there's some confusion over who gave them the right to use the high school, but I know as a result of that the parking lot has deteriorated at the high school. And so my concern is making sure that when the work is done downtown, that none of our streets or alleys have any type of negative impact from the work that's being done. And so they weren't able to clarify where the staging areas would be, but that's something that the contractor is responsible for negotiating with, possibly private property owners who maybe have an empty lot or that sort of thing.
Okay, the JPA feasibility study has not
No.
met. Little Lake Fire District, JPA
Hasn't met.
hasn't met. Okay, the other community boards and committees, Museum Advisory Board.
Yeah, I'm so tired, sorry to stay focused.
I know, I'm
Museum had an event on Sunday, did anybody attend?
Yes, I did.
Yes, you
And
did.
I was gonna say that under council reports.
Oh, okay, I'll let you save it.
Okay.
The Museum Advisory Board is growing in advocacy. Each time we meet, we're meeting monthly now. I get a lot of communication on a weekly basis from people who are concerned about what's happening with our museum, not just from Willits, but throughout the county, wanting to know what's going on and how can they be a part of the solution, which is a good thing. And people, the county seems to be paying attention to what's happening there. The concern I have right now is that for this fiscal year, the county is going to see somewhere between, estimates are somewhere between $150,000 to $200,000 savings, because they let the director go, and basically the museum was sitting in limbo for so many months that there's going to be this huge cost savings to the county, and I don't want to see the county just absorb that in their general fund. So I'm trying to advocate, and hope that all you will, that the museum be able to roll that over into their budget. And the reasoning behind that is all those things that didn't get done Next year, they're looking at cutting the museum's budget another $100,000. We need to catch up. The things that we were without, we need those funds. So I'll be pushing for the Board of Supervisors to roll that money over into the next fiscal year. And we're redoing our bylaws and policies and all sorts of things like that. Yeah, fun stuff.
Okay, any questions there? How about the Willits Tourism Board?
Tourism Board, we meet the third Wednesday of every month from 4 to 6 here in the council chambers. The public's invited to attend.
4 to 6?
Yes, or 4 to 5:30, I apologize, 4 to 5:30. We're always looking for ideas, so if any of you have ideas or the community comes to you and has ideas on things that they want to see, you heard me mention maybe those barriers in the lot. We have lots of signature events that we're discussing, and we have a whole host of events that we're working on, and then figuring out the timing of all of them, because we know that there's some projects that we have slated for downtown that we would like to see happen, but you can't do that when you know that sidewalks are going to be tore up and things. So we're looking for some other events in our community that are outside the downtown area in terms of maybe permanent things. The other thing is that a lot of people have been discussing about how we need to get people off of the bypass and into town, and I thought the whole reason for the bypass was to get people out of town so that we could enjoy our local community. So here we are trying to promote tourism, and what I've been trying to get people to think is that we want people to come here, but we want people to come here for an experience. We want you to come here for the weekend, to go for a hike, go to a music festival, eat, stay at our hotels, gas up before you go, but not just get off the highway, stop, and then off you go. But we're trying to get the focus of this tourism board is really to get people here for an experience and targeting those people that are in the Bay Area and Sacramento, because some of the data that's coming in shows that those are the people that are interested in coming and spending some tourism dollars in our community. So.
Has Claudia Winning been in touch with you?
Yes.
Yeah, because she has an event coming up in June. It's called Women's Empowerment something. Anyway, she's hoping to draw people from the Bay Area. And she also talks about it being a replicable model of the kind of thing that could be a convention center, that we could become known as a place that can do this, where you have the facilities, you have the motels and the restaurants, you have caterers, you can then show people how they can plan their event here, and it's a lot less expensive than having your event in San Francisco or many other places.
No, what she's doing is very much in line with the types of things that we're doing, is trying to get people not to just host one event, but trying to pull many events together so that people can come here for an experience. And we as locals can, of course, enjoy it, because that's an important component of it.
Okay, moving on. Council member reports and recommendations. I wanted to report that I attended, maybe some of you also, the Brook Trail Second Access Forum that happened on March 5th, and apparently there was one again last night, which I didn't hear about.
That was a board meeting.
It was a board, the Brook Trails board, and apparently they talked about it, of course. And then there's another meeting on March 22nd, which I guess may be another board meeting. Anyway, that meeting was pretty useful, and both talking a lot about how individuals can be more prepared for emergencies, and that's one of the basic things that you need to do as families and neighborhoods, and that helps overall fire departments and everything else if every individual has handled their own emergency planning and doing the 911 reverse, getting on those things. But then in addition to that, they talked about the issues of emergency evacuation planning, and then the ultimate need for a second access. the road of Sherwood Road extending northward all the way up to close to Laytonville was considered the most important immediate need for a secondary emergency evacuation route. And apparently it's considered okay if it's only one directional, that a regular passenger car could make it through that
It's a
road.
pretty
But
rough road.
it's a pretty rough road, and I think that was kind of like priority number one, is make sure that that's a passable road for regular passenger vehicles, that you don't have to have a four-wheel drive or a SUV.
That would do away with it if you had to have four-wheel drive.
No, it would not be effective at all. And then clearly it depends where the emergency is happening, which evacuation routes get used. But anyway, there's going to be more talk about that, I am sure. It was an interesting forum.
Can I add
Sure.
something? Both Larry and I went, and you mentioned the emergency stuff. They had somebody there from OES, Dan Jurdy, and Supervisor Krosky was there. And from the Brook Trails Board, Tony Orth presented the subject of boulevard districts.
Yes.
And how it looks like Brook Trails wants to pursue that aspect of it. It would be a taxing mechanism for those on the Sherwood Road corridor to be taxed. There were some folks there from Brook Trails that wondered why they would be taxed, other folks that were all for it, et cetera. So that was kind of the taste of what went there.
Okay, and one, yeah. Okay, another event coming up is a prevent harassment training
Yes.
that, who's putting that on?
Actually, that is through REMIF.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the AB 1825 here. You know, if council members are interested in attending, it's mandatory as for supervisors, and so we have a number of our supervisors going. It's March 20th.
Yes.
In Ukiah. There's a morning and afternoon session, and then there's other sessions occurring later and over the next 2 months.
In other locations as well, yeah. And then on the subject of REMIF, the next meeting of REMIF is in Ukiah on
The
the
22nd.
22nd, and I'm not going to be able to.
No, but, and of course, I'm not going to be there. I'll be off the board by then. But Stephanie will be, yeah, and she'll be a board member by that time.
Okay, good. Any other council member reports and recommendations?
Just one more thought, one thing I wanted to mention.
I have a good one.
All right, the Willits Now and Then exhibit that's been up for quite some time. I got to thinking about how can we still use that in Willits, and so I talked to the curator and we brainstormed some ideas on how those items could still be used in the community. And once the Visit Willits Tourism Board officially receives their nonprofit status, it's possible that we could petition the County Board of Supervisors to donate those, because they're not artifacts, they're just displays, to donate those to the tourism board, who could then enclose them, and businesses who want to participate would be able to have that piece of historical information that's been gathered, and we would be able to mount them on the side of their building. And then create a walking tour, so you would be able to take your smartphone, you would start at a certain destination and be able to get a historical walking tour of the downtown community by going and reading each one of those boards. And, you know, maybe curator would be able to be the one that gives you all of the information. But that's something that we're exploring.
Well, on that subject, I did go to there was a guided tour of that exhibit. The exhibit's going to be up for probably another month, is what they waffled a little bit about how long it's going to be up, but it's still up, and it's a really very interesting exhibit. And the guided tour was wonderful because Kim Bancroft is very knowledgeable and very articulate and very passionate about the history and the ambiance of our town that we have here in Main Street. And then following the guided tour, there was a 1-hour forum, and they selected people sort of representing different sectors. They had Allison with the Chamber of Commerce, they had Jane Fletcher talking about cannabis, they had Ernie Burton talking about the lumber industry, what am I forgetting? Bill Barksdale talking sort of about real estate, but he was talking about Revive Ed and sort of a lot of the exciting ideas he has about banners and all of that. And I think there was one more person. Anyway, it was a very, and then the people that were there, which was a pretty big crowd, probably at least 60 people, I'd say, they asked some good questions, and there is a lot of energy about revitalizing and how to really stimulate what Willits is good at, and I think that's going to serve us very well as we go forward. And Sip Some Soup was this weekend on Sunday, and that was really fun as usual. And I hope they made a lot of money for the Daily Bread. Right? Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to mention is I had a kind of a lunch meeting with Kevin Doble, and we're going to meet. He's the mayor in Ukiah, and we're going to meet periodically and kind of exchange ideas. And I think that's good training for me to find out what Ukiah is up to. Anybody else, or are we all done here? We're almost 10:30, and I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned.
We have something else.
You have the discussion regarding opportunity zones in California.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. I'm not, I take back, okay.
And I don't have much. I distributed to you a little bit about the opportunity zones. We got alerted that apparently Mendocino has been left out of identification as an opportunity zone. And opportunity zones, as best I can tell, something that has been created federally as a result of some of the tax law changes that occurred, and it allows individuals to actually invest in these, invest capital gains in these opportunity zones, and then those investments are used for business purposes, etc. And it's supposed to be focused at low-income communities and throughout California, but somehow all of Mendocino County got left out. That's
qualified.
Yeah, that's the kind of the gist of it. And so it was here to see if the council's interested in, sending a letter to the governor or whatever about the failure to include us as well as other parts of the county in an opportunity zone. That's the gist of it, I think.
If we know who to write to, I think that's an excellent idea. That we should ask if they can reconsider.
Yeah.
Maybe we're doing better than we thought we were.
Well, there may be a cutoff, and maybe we don't qualify. But it seems to me we should qualify.
There was some criteria. Not familiar as much as maybe I should be with actually our population income levels, but it would seem that we should qualify.
Yeah.
Did they say what the rate was?
It's in here.
I don't think that was in there.
Let's see. It says simply that qualify under one or both of the mandatory criteria. 80% of the statewide or metropolitan area family income. And I don't know what that is, unfortunately.
So if the school district is showing more than 80% of their students are low-income qualified for free or reduced lunch, I would think that
Well, there's that, and
should
there's
be
also
falling in that criteria somehow,
and
somewhere in
census
there.
data. So, do you need direction from us to?
Yeah, probably
Stephanie?
would, yeah.
And we'll ask Stephanie to look into it?
Yes.
Does that sound like a consensus?
Sounds good.
According to this map, it looks like we're a very prosperous community here. We're not in the black, we're the gray, so I'm guessing that's prosperity.
Could be worse.
Who needs your thinking?
Yeah, it could be worse, okay. So we should
Yeah.
just at least find out whether we do qualify, and if so, then we should be in that zone. Okay, now, are we ready to adjourn the meeting at 10:30?